Chapter 315. Fly? What a lofty name. Since the birth of humans, countless people had tried to break free from the shackles of gravity and fly into the sky. The world of Azeroth did not have the Wright brothers, but there were dwarves who sought death by building airplanes. Ahem, I've gone too far. Windrunner, in the world of rangers, and even in the world of the High Elves, it represented the two extremes of wind and speed. However, there was a sad story called Windrunner can't really ride the wind and fly into the sky. No matter how many years passed, or even until the moment of their death, the Windrunner sisters would never forget the same question they asked their parents when they were young: why can't Windrunner fly? Aurelia was the same. Sylvanas was the same. Sasha and Lilith were the same. Even though they were old, even though they knew that elves were not dragons and could not fly by nature. However, in the deepest part of their hearts, they still had the same dream, the same desire. Fly. Now, Duque actually said, bring them to show off, bring them to fly. The Windrunner sisters did not know what show off was. But flying. As far as they knew, there was no spell in Azeroth that could allow people to truly fly. What are you going to do? Sylvanas' eyebrows moved, with some excitement and agitation. Humph. If I disappoint you, there will be serious consequences. Aurelia seemed to be very dignified and elegant, her left hand supporting her right elbow and her right hand supporting her chin. However, under that mature and steady appearance, a wild and passionate heart was beating. This was not the first day she knew Duque. Every time she met him, she would be intrigued by Duque's miracles. A human who always had countless new and interesting gadgets easily won the liking of the active Windrunner. Duque was like a wonderful book. The book was not thick, and it felt like it could be finished in one go. Who knew that as she read on, there would be new surprises every time? Her eyes moved, and the focus of her attention was only on Duque. Duque smiled mysteriously. I plan to do this. All of a sudden, 128 hands of magic raised their palms to the sky and shot frost arrows from all directions. No, it wasn't as simple as frost arrows. This was an icicle arrow hail that reduced damage in exchange for a higher shooting speed. The casting time of level 1 frost arrow was the shortest. With the support of various metamagic abilities, the casting time of each frost arrow was reduced to less than half a second. In a situation where there was no additional injection of ice elemental energy, it was just pieces of ice crystals that were shot into the sky. From afar, it looked like a fountain of ice and snow that kept spewing upward. Duque bowed elegantly. Beautiful Windrunner ladies, the splendid stage is ready. Aren't you going to go up and perform a wind dance? The emerald eyes of Aurelia and Sylvanas flickered with pleasant surprise. They completely understood that Duque wanted them to use the ice crystals as a springboard to jump into the air and attack. For mortals, this was definitely an incredible thing. Stepping on a flying ice prism to jump higher into the sky, then stepping on another even higher ice prism to jump up again, using the ice prism as leverage to jump more than 200 meters in the air, and then launching an attack on the orc cavalry on the back of the red dragon flying in the air. From the sound of it, this was simply wishful thinking and crazy courting death. For mortals, perhaps it was true. For the Windrunner, it was a different matter. In a sense, this was no different from what they did when they lightly shuttled through the tall forest, jumping from branch to branch. The only difference was the height, and whether Duke could provide them with enough ice prism pillars at the right places to use as leverage points. If a stranger had asked them to do this, the Windrunner sisters would have snorted. But he was Duke Marcus, a superwise man, a miraculous man who used a magical ice ship to save 50,000 Storm Elite soldiers. He didn't ask things like, "Can I trust you?" which spoiled the mood. Instead, it was the most mature and steady elder sister who issued a challenge to her younger sister. "Oh, my dear sister, do you want to compete?" The valiant Aurelia had a charming smile on her face as she raised the longbow in her hand, looking like a hunter who was about to hunt a turkey. "Oh, my beloved sister, how do you want to compete?" Queen Sylvanas, whose competitive spirit was completely aroused, curled her lips, and returned a challenging smile. "Quantity. Of course, whoever gets the first prize will be number one." Aurelia glanced at Zuluhid, who was at the highest point in the air. "What about the stakes?" Queen Sylvanas smirked. "How about the loser calls Duque Big Brother 10 times? Among the 4 Windrunner sisters, even the youngest Lilith was over 1,000 years old. Although the Windrunner family was not so particular about etiquette and seniority, it was still embarrassing for them to call a young man less than 20 years old Big Brother. Before Aurelia could agree, Duque answered first. "Okay." Aurelia rolled her eyes at Duque, who was trying to take advantage of her, and finally nodded almost imperceptibly. The 2 sisters didn't say what the prize for the winner was. It was simple. For the Windrunner who loved the wind and freedom, flying was the best prize. In the next second, the 2 beautiful figures disappeared. Amidst the whooshing sound of the ice crystals shooting up into the sky, there was a faint sound of collision. Every ice crystal that deviated from its predetermined trajectory was accompanied by a vigorous green figure whose figure was almost invisible to the naked eye. Ha ha ha. Ha ha ha. Clear laughter, hearty laughter, enough to make people dream. The laughter of the Windrunner sisters grew louder and louder with the ice crystal fountain until it rose nearly 300 meters into the sky. The seemingly random ice crystals could not hit the flying red dragon, but they had enough footholds for the Windrunner sisters to close the distance between them and the dragon riders. This allowed them to display their magnificent and explosive archery skills. Dance of 3 arrows, it was a knight-errant archery skill that shot 3 rounds of arrows in a short period of time. In the hands of the Windrunner sisters, this skill became a godly skill that could shoot 3 arrows at a time and shoot 9 arrows in 3 rounds. Stepping on the ice prism that was less than the size of an adult's palm, Aurelia bent her beautiful waist backward in order to find an angle to shoot. Under the force of her waist and abdomen, the seductive mermaid line was clearly visible. It was obviously an extremely high speed, and it was obvious that she dodged the red dragon's breath by a hair's breadth. But the moment before shooting, Aurelia fell into a state of extreme stillness. Chapter 3:16. The red dragon's crisscrossing sharp teeth, the orcs' open mouths when they roared, and the dragon riders' bloodshot eyes were reflected in Aurelia's emerald eyes. Whoosh! The sound of sharp arrows gliding. Faced with the Windrunner's archery, even the great shaman's nature's protection could only sigh helplessly and hopelessly. 2 arrows broke the wind shield. 1 arrow hit the face. The result of 3 rounds of 9 arrows was that 3 dragon riders lost their lives forever. Their sinful bodies fell from the sky and died without a complete corpse. No! Zulusid was so angry that his eyeballs almost popped out of their sockets. Kill them. Go, tear them apart. The dragon maw orcs' throats were almost hoarse from shouting. Driven by them, the red dragons showed their fierceness as the overlords of the sky. They pounced quickly and violently, with a large area of scorching dragon breath. Everything was chasing the 2 ghostly green figures. But no matter what, they couldn't catch up. This situation was completely unacceptable to the dragon maw orcs. The elven rangers who couldn't fly used the ice prisms to make all kinds of godly dodges in the air. Even the most imaginative orcs couldn't imagine such a situation. But the other party not only thought of it, but also did it. Duque's cooperation with the Windrunner sisters could be said to be flawless. Whether they wanted to speed up or turn in the air, when they needed it most, in the most ideal place, there would be an ice prism flying out of nowhere just right. The hands of magic floating 100 meters in the air would certainly not disappoint and shoot the ice prism more than 100 meters into the sky to the most perfect place. There was no need for words, no need for hints. Duque did all this perfectly with the help of the system. Aurelia and Queen Sylvanas were pleasantly surprised, no, ecstatic. They didn't know that Duque's system determined all their movement trajectories, the enemy's attack routes, and possible dodging routes. All Duque had to do was to let the hands of magic shoot the ice prism in the desired route. They were just very excited. So there is someone in the world who can get along with me so well? Could this be the legendary telepathy, our hearts are connected as one's heart? In any case, at first glance, the Windrunner sisters seemed to be flying. With agility that surpassed griffins and even giant dragons, it flapped its wings, twisted its body, and soared in the air at an altitude of 300 meters. Zuluhid was about to go crazy. The draconic beast man was terrified. Some of the dragon riders began to urge their giant dragons to climb higher into the sky in order to gain a moment of peace. There were also some dragon riders who crazily dived towards Duque, who was controlling the ice fountain, only to be killed by the arrows of the elven rangers who had been waiting for a long time. Whether Zulud was willing to admit it or not, the Red Dragon army, which had been chased out of the battlefield, had not played its role at all. At this moment, the Orc army had almost reached the northern sniping point of Sodder Bridge, and the transport ships had almost reached the bottom of the bridge. At this moment, by Duque's side were nearly 10,000 torrential fortress soldiers who had long since returned to their posts. They cheered and shouted, "Long live Duque," or "Long live the Alliance." With more complete heavy ordnance, they rained down a deathly rain of stones, ballistae, and cannonballs on the tribe. As always, a rain of flesh and blood rained down on the bridge. Orc corpses and broken limbs that had been sent flying by the huge stones fell from the side of the bridge like dumplings. As some of the ordnance had been destroyed by the dragon's breath, it was impossible to completely seal off the strait. But for every transport ship to pass through, at least 2 ships had to be sunk. Looking at the miserable state of the army, at the draconic beastman cavalry beside him, and then at the Windrunner sisters who had dominated the mid-low altitudes and were unstoppable, Zuluhid's eyes were bloodshot. Retreat! The chief of the Dragon Maw clan had used up almost all his courage to shout this word. It was easy to make the orcs attack. But it required supreme courage to make the orcs retreat. This was because he would have to bear the scorn of other clans and the disdain of almost the entire tribe. Zuluhid had no other choice. A red dragon that could be used as a mount was too precious, especially when he realized that the red dragons that had escaped from the battlefield were all flying towards the north. He had a deep sense of foreboding. As long as that thing was here, there should be no need to worry that the red dragons that had escaped would not return. But he had a premonition that these abominable lizards would never return. This anxiety almost drove Zuluhid crazy. The Red Dragon army, which should have been killing everything in its path, had retreated like stray dogs with their tails between their legs. The entire sky echoed with the laughter of the Windrunner sisters. This was a flying that they had not dared to imagine for thousands of years. Fighting against the noble overlords of the sky, the dragons, and killing the filthy and ugly orcs in the high altitudes that they had never touched before, was there anything more wonderful than this for the Windrunner sisters? Even the mature and steady Aurelia could not help but laugh from the bottom of her heart. Their emerald green knee-high boots tapped lightly on the ice prism that was constantly descending. The Windrunner sisters were like fairies descending from the sky, jumping down step by step. "Yo, beautiful elven girls, are you looking for a husband? Goddess, I love you." The generals and soldiers from Torrential Fortress gave the warmest cheers to the 2 female elven rangers who were flying in the sky. Aurelia combed her long blonde hair that had been messed up by the wind so that she could return to the image of a dignified ranger in the shortest time possible. Queen Sylvanas, on the other hand, proudly stood with her hands on her hips, forming a graceful S-shaped curve as she accepted the cheers of thousands of soldiers. Although the Windrunner sisters had killed the most enemies, the focus of the sisters' attention was on Duque. They knew very well that without Duque, they would not have been able to create such a miracle. Before thanking Duque, it was better to settle some things first. My beloved sister, how are the results? 68. Aurelia held her head high and chest out, inadvertently making the pair of high-jewel peaks even more alluring. Sylvanus was taken aback. What's wrong? My good sister, did you lose? Aurelia had the happy smile of a big sister who had successfully consolidated her position. Queen Sylvanus shrugged and spread out her hands. I did not lose. You won? How much? Aurelia's senses were very sharp. She was very sure that her sister's kill count should not be higher than hers. Queen Sylvanus sighed. I did not win either. I also got 68. A trace of disappointment and joy flashed in Aurelia's eyes. She was disappointed because she could not establish a strong position as the big sister. She was happy because her sister's skills were not inferior to hers. Chapter 3:17. Okay, then it's a draw. Aurelia also put her hands on her hips. No, we both lost. Sylvanus smiled slyly. Her crescent moon-like smiling eyes gave Aurelia a bad feeling. My dear sister, have you forgotten the Windrunner's family motto? A Windrunner must be the best ranger. If he can't hunt the best prey, then it's a failure. Failure? Oh, that's too bad. What's worse is that if she failed, wouldn't she have to call Duque a good brother? Damn it. Aurelia really couldn't bring herself to ask an almost immortal, thousands of years old high elf to call a human youth brother. Not to mention that there were over 10,000 pairs of eyes looking at her from time to time. The feeling of being watched by tens of thousands of people made Aurelia's scalp tingle. On the other hand, rather than saying it was the Windrunner's family motto, it was more of the pride of being a strong person, and she couldn't deny it. If she didn't do her best, then she lost. If she didn't hunt the best prey, then she lost. He should have admitted defeat cleanly. But Duque, only Duque. Aurelia didn't want to call him brother. Somehow, Aurelia subconsciously felt that once she called him brother, she would break some kind of taboo, and it would make their already vague relationship even more dangerous. Even if Aurelia didn't want to admit it, she had to admit that her attention was attracted by Duque. His schemes, his wisdom, and his endless new ideas made her, who loved new things, crazy. She was afraid. Afraid that as an immortal, she would fall in love with a human who was as bright as a firework but had a short life. For the high elves who had almost endless lifespans, decades seemed to pass in a moment, and this time was often the lifetime of a human. The lifespan of a human was really too short. So short that any high elf couldn't stand it. After decades of passion and love, there would be hundreds or even thousands of years of loneliness. And the only reason that could make Aurelia build a line of defense in her heart was age. A 15-year-old human youth should be a baby to the elves who were thousands of years old. However, her attention was always attracted by Duque. Worst of all, her hateful sister seemed to have seen through this, and would not let it go, and used it to tease her. It was obvious that what Sylvanus was doing now was a classic example of, he would rather work hard than let his big sister escape. Oh, my good sister, don't you always tell us to watch our words and keep our promises? It's also an important part of fulfilling a promise. Queen Sylvie smiled faintly. Demon King Aurelia pursed her lips and said nothing. He had made a mistake. He had only agreed because the great Demon King had absolute confidence in his skills. Who would have thought that his sister would grow to such an extent? Now that he thought about it, it had indeed been a long time since he had fought or hunted with Sylvanus. Furthermore, there had been very few opportunities in the past 10 years, especially after this mischievous second sister had become Kuel Salus's wage thief. Come to think of it, in the Battle of Southshore, she had deliberately held back, right? Aurelia finally realized that she had been tricked by her sister. Biting her bright red lips, Aurelia finally raised her head and stared at the gazes from all directions. In fact, it was her illusion. The human warriors were basically busy wiping out the orcs on the bridge. Yes, we did lose. But I have the right to pay later. Huh, you said you lost the bet. You're so hesitant to pay the bill. Then I'll pay the bill first, okay? Queen Sylvie giggled. Seeing her sister embarrassed, Queen Sylvie was very happy. Here, the sisters were fighting, and Duque was the winner. Even though he knew that Queen Sylvie was deliberately flirting with his big sister, Duque still felt very happy. Queen Sylvie. That was the famous Queen Sylvie, who was worshipped and feared by millions of people in the future. Even if it was not from her heart, Queen Sylvie did indeed lean over. Her left hand was on Duque's left shoulder, and her right hand was gently stroking Duque's stiff neck. Her red lips were close to Duque's ears. She looked provocatively at the Demon King Aurelia, and spoke in a sweet tone that no one had ever seen before. Good brother. Good brother. Good brother. Without pause, every word was affectionate, and the ending of each word was deliberately lengthened for the sake of sexiness. Listening to her, Duque's body was numb, and the pleasure of having an electric shock almost made Duque lose his ability to think. Let's not talk about the reactions of those around who noticed this scene. Just by looking at Aurelia, one could see that the great Demon King was already dumbfounded. This heroine, who had become famous since the beginning of the Troll War, had killed thousands of trolls without blinking an eye, and had always been a dignified and steady great Demon King in front of outsiders. At this moment, there was shock and embarrassment on her face. For some reason, seeing Sylvanas leaning on Duque and hearing her call him good brother in a shameful tone, Aurelia felt a fever all over her body. Her skin was burning hot. Staring at her sister's delicate face, which was 80% similar to hers, she felt as if Aurelia had leaned on Duque and flattered Duque in a shameless tone. It was as if there were countless eyes staring at her from all directions. The shameful chord in Aurelia's heart finally broke. Ah! The dignified Ranger General, the big sister of the Windrunner family, Aurelia, who was secretly admired by countless men, screamed like a little girl and ran away without looking back. Ha ha ha. Interesting. So interesting. Big sister, who asked you to lecture us with a serious face all day? Ha ha ha. I'm dying of laughter. Queen Sylvanas, who had finally succeeded in her evil plan, held her twitching waist and laughed so hard that she almost lost control. After laughing for a full 3 minutes, Queen Sylvanas reluctantly stopped. She suddenly looked at Duque, who was at a loss, and said, I was just teasing my big sister. If you think that I, Sylvanas, am interested in you, then I'm really sorry. Sorry? Who would apologize like this? Feeling the sharp pain from the soft flesh on his waist, Duque's tears were about to come out. Sylvanas, this bastard, in order to draw a clear line between her and him, actually gave him a hard hit on the soft flesh on his waist. That poor piece of flesh was almost twisted 360 degrees by her 2 slender fingers. Ah! The bitter Duque screamed because of the pain, but he was interrupted by Queen Sylvanas quickly covering his mouth. Chapter 318. I'm sorry, little one, this is a small warning for you. At the same time, let me give you a word of advice. The women of the Windrunner family are not to be touched. If you want to have my sister, you must first become a hero in the hearts of the High Elves. When the last sentence was said, Sylvanas was already hundreds of meters away. The wind carried her warning word for word into Duque's ears. Duque smiled bitterly. It was not because of Sylvanas' capriciousness or her teasing. It seemed that it would be very difficult to woo Aurelia. Fortunately, it was not like there was no chance. However, the women of the Windwalker family were either thorny roses or stubborn people who were stubborn and stubborn. After repelling the menacing Red Dragon Legion, defending Solder Bridge would not be a problem. Originally, a natural stronghold that could be defended by 1,000 people was now guarded by nearly 10,000 people. There was no risk at all. Duque was not worried that a fierce person from the tribe would break through by force, because there was actually a fierce person with the same surname as Trollbane hidden in the army of Torrential Castle. This guy was not famous now, but in the original history, his statue stood side by side with that of Aurelia in the King's Valley of Stormwind City and was worshipped by the people. He was known as one of the 5 heroes of the Dark Portal. Duque scratched his head and found that he had nothing to do for the time being. He did not know that at this moment, there was a pair of eyes staring at him without blinking. The owner of these eyes was Miss Alicia Barev. After becoming Duque's assistant in the field of magic, Miss Barev had been quietly performing her duties, leading the team of mages for Duque. Submissive, she was inconspicuous in Duque's camp. At this time, Alicia let out a low sigh. People who can control their own fate are really enviable. Anyone could see the ambiguous feelings between Duque and Aurelia. Alicia was not envious or jealous of Aurelia. What touched her deeply was the brilliance of Duque when he changed his fate. Without the shackles of his family, he was born as a commoner, but he rose to a high position in the tide of the world's great changes and grasped his own fate. For some unknown reason, Alicia developed a desire for Duque. I obviously shouldn't think about it, but I just can't suppress the thought. If it's Duque, maybe he can help me get rid of the shackles of my family and obtain true freedom. At this time, Duque finally felt Alicia's gaze. He turned around and asked, "Miss Barev, is there anything I can help you with?" "No, that. It seems that there are still a lot of transport ships that have broken through the strait. Shouldn't we chase after them?" Duque smirked. "I know that the Horde might attack the northern continent from here. As the deputy commander-in-chief, how could I not block that possibility?" Duque was right. He did not give the Horde any chance at all. Just as the Horde's transport fleet desperately rushed under the Sodder Bridge, thinking that they were away from the Alliance's ambush, at the strait 5 kilometers east of the Sodder Bridge, the orcs who were rowing the ships despaired to find that the strait that they had reported the day before was blocked. Tens of thousands of tons of huge rocks blocked the northern side of the sea route, while the southern side was sunk by a dozen merchant ships filled with rocks, blocking the entire sea route. When did this happen? The orcs in the transport fleet fell into complete despair and fear. Soon, they no longer had to fear, because the human ballistae that appeared from the cliff easily sent them to the bottom of the sea to feed the fish. An hour later, in the wetlands of the southern continent, Grim Battle Fortress. Chief Zuluhid of the Dragon Maw clan angrily smashed and destroyed everything he saw on the way. He rushed to the most mysterious room, and in front of the steel gate, he saw an old orc with a lame leg. "Necros, where is she?" "She's in there. Something's not right." Necros was a half-baked warlock and an immature shaman, but as Zuluhid's confidant, he had a special ability. He could better control something called Demon Soul, and that thing happened to be the key to controlling the Red Dragon. After obtaining the consent of the Guardian, Zuluhid finally rushed in angrily and grabbed the woman dressed in red inside. "Hey! Call back all your descendants that ran away. The Horde needs their lives." "Alexstrasza! Bastard! Who do you think I am?" The red-haired woman let out an angry roar, and an invisible force swept through the entire space. A timid person would definitely be scared out of their wits. Unfortunately, it was useless against Zuluhid. As she rushed towards Zuluhid, the guardian of the Demon's Soul appeared. Its flaming claws grabbed the woman's curved horns and smashed her heroic face into the hard stone floor. Blood immediately seeped out of the woman's mouth. "Yes, Alexstrasza, the strongest and greatest female dragon queen, but so what? You're just a slave of our Horde now. Ha ha ha." Zuluhid laughed wildly as he watched the Guardian rub the beautiful face of the Red Dragon Queen, who had turned into human form, against the cold and rough stone floor. The sharp and uneven ground left several shallow bloodstains on Alexstrasza's wheat-colored face. Lowly orc. The Red Dragon Queen roared angrily and struggled hard. The continuous humiliation almost drove her crazy, but it was to no avail. Not far away, the thing in the hands of the lame beast man Necros greatly weakened her strength. 10,000 years ago, the Pentashade dragons gathered in the Dragon Sleep Temple at the request of the Black Dragon King, Nesario, and created the artifact that gathered all the power of the dragon race, Dragon Soul, to fight against the invading Burning Legion demons. All the dragons joined the war to fight against the demons. Nesario activated the ability of the Dragon Soul to annihilate all the demons on the battlefield, but then betrayed the dragons and the resistance army. The Blue Dragon King Maligos tried to stop them, but caused the Blue Dragons to suffer heavy losses, and almost all of them were wiped out. The Blue Dragon Queen Syndagosa also died in this tragedy, and Maligos fell into madness. Nesario himself could not withstand this power and turned into a monster with a body full of lava. From then on, he was called the Wings of Death. Later, the Dragon Soul passed through the hands of many owners, and finally became the Demon Soul, under the corruption of the demonic power. Under the secret guidance of the schemer ghoul Dan, Zuluhid sensed the existence of the Demon Soul, and found it. 10,000 years had passed, and the effect of this artifact had changed, but the power of the dragon contained in it had never changed. Chapter 319. Through the Demon Soul, Zulud was able to suppress Alexstrasza and use her as a bargaining chip to threaten the entire Red Dragon tribe. The Red Dragons had no choice but to submit because the Red Dragon Queen was the source of their power and reproduction. Without the Red Dragon Queen's blessing of life, no young dragon could grow into a true dragon. No matter how angry they were. No matter how unwilling they were. The Red Dragons flew into Grimbader Fortress one after another and were treated like horses by the Beast Men. They were roughly fitted with saddle-like riding gear and became the Beastmen's mounts. Zulud knew very well that the failure of the attack on Sodder Bridge was an unrepeatable accident. There were probably less than 5 High Elven Rangers in all of Quell, the Loss, who were so elusive. They just had to run into 2 of them. Even worse was the unimaginable way they fought. Even at this moment, Zulud felt like he was living in a nightmare. This failure was a foregone conclusion. Zulud believed that the Horde needed more Red Dragon riders. He did not believe that the high-speed Red Dragons would run into that strange team no matter where they flew. Alexstrasza screamed, "Zulud, I will kill you. I will kill every single green-skinned beastman. I swear. I will." Zulud laughed coldly as he watched the Demon Soul's guardian press the Red Dragon Queen's face into the cold ground. Ha ha ha. Perhaps there will be a day like that, but until then, you will be a slave for the Horde. Come, call them. Let our red babies return. Zulud raised his hand, and Necros behind him increased the power output of the Demon Soul. Both Necros and Alexstrasza showed a pained expression. The Demon Soul was not a good item with gentle power. The price of controlling it was one's own life force. Necros did not care. He had picked up his life. In the battle with the Drenii, he had lost a leg. He was not like the other unyielding beast men who hugged an enemy and died together. Thus, he was looked down upon by the other beast men. After surviving, he did not cherish his life. He gave the Red Dragon Queen the greatest pain the evil artifact could inflict. What Zuluhid got in return was a burst of cold, wild laughter. Ha ha ha. They are free. I don't know what happened to them, but they are no longer bound by me. Queen Honga laughed maniacally. What? What was going on? Speak. Under the suppression of the divine artifact that came from the source of the dragon clan's power, Zuluhid had received very bad news. The red dragons that had run away could not return, and they were not dead. No, I have to report this to the great chieftain. Zulud almost pissed his pants as he rushed to Orgrim and explained everything like a sinner. I'm sorry, great chief, I screwed up. Not only did we fail to protect the transport fleet, but we also lost a large number of red dragons. Orgrim bared his teeth as if his heart was aching, but in the end, he did not unleash his fury. Fate. Orgrim's voice was low and he spoke slowly. Zulud, do you believe in fate? Do you think the most powerful shaman can see the course of fate? If you can really predict the future, what kind of price do you have to pay? Orgrim's three seemingly irrelevant questions left Zuluhid in a daze. But he quickly replied, fate does exist. Shamans are not the only ones who can see the course of fate. As for the price, Kilrog Deadeye is a good example. Orgrim patted his chest. The beastmen have deviated from the path of shamans. Fate no longer shows itself to the beastmen. On the contrary, our enemy seems to be very good at it. I once thought that this was a simple scheme that surpassed the wisdom of the beastmen. But when I found out that all my plans had been seen through, I was secretly afraid for a long time. In the end, I came to my senses. Came to your senses? Yes. My opponent, Duke Marcus, can clearly see the course of the river of fate. So, even I don't know what to do next in order to escape the trap of this terrifying enemy. Zuluhid was secretly shocked. This was tantamount to his great chief admitting that the human Duke was an existence that surpassed the prophet. Orgrim brought Zuluhid to a cliff in the northeast of the wetlands. The scene there shocked Zuluhid. The beastman's simplicity and directness have achieved this miracle. I just ordered my men to find a way to cross the sea no matter what. Zuluhid saw the way. Perhaps it was because the great chief was standing near the cliff that divided the north and south continents when he said this. Those who could not think had actually used an entire winter to open up a slope on the cliff that was dozens of meters high and covered in ice and snow. The slope extended from the plateau all the way to the sea. It was a huge slope of up to 50 meters wide, enough to lift the largest transport ship from the wetlands to the beach. And this place was less than 5 kilometers away from that damned strait. That's right, it was this way that the great chief himself was not clear about, that created an even more profound chain of plans. Whether it was the small and medium clans attacking South Shore from the front, the transport ships and the Red Dragon Legion trying to cross the strait and the Sodder Bridge, or the 200,000-strong Horde army that would arrive at the coast of South Flow in 2 days, everything became a cover for the elite Horde army led by Orgrim. Tonight, these 50,000 elite beastmen would cross the natural moat that had obstructed the Horde for more than half a year. Great Chief, you really are the strongest. Zuluhid praised from the bottom of his heart. After I leave, the Horde of the wetlands will be in your hands. You must maintain enough pressure on the Alliance. Especially your Red Dragon Legion, don't just attack one place. The Alliance doesn't have many experts of that level. As if remembering something, Orgrim added, last time, it was these 2 elves who fought against Hellscream, right? Think about it, how many Grom Hellroars do we have? Hearing this, Zuluhid's eyes surged with confidence. Orgrim punched Zuluhid in the chest, but Zuluhid did not panic. Instead, he was pleasantly surprised. Because this represented the great chief's trust. I'll leave everything to you. That's what the great chief meant. Seeing Orgrim carrying his famous Hammer of Destruction, and disappearing into the night with his army, Zuluhid's heart was filled with a fiery passion. At this moment, Duque was surrounded by a large group of red dragons with golden vertical pupils. Chapter 320. The Red Dragon Queen was now under the control of the Horde, allowing the Horde to obtain a valuable and powerful air force. There was no way Duque would not know about such an important event. There were some things that couldn't be solved just by knowing. First of all, Duque had no idea where the Devil's Soul was located. Of course, this could be found through spies monitoring the tribe's excavations. However, finding it didn't mean that there was a countermeasure. The tribe's demigod expert, Ghoul Dan, had purposely allowed Zuluhid to find it. Ruining Ghoul Dan's plan meant that there was a high chance of fighting Ghoul Dan early. Duque did not have any special thoughts about this terrifying evil sect's final boss that even Antonidas could not shake directly. Second was, Devil's Soul's attributes. Just from the sound of it, one could tell that it was something that belonged to the demons. With such a strong evil force, Wuther and the other gold saints would probably not be able to purify it completely even if they were to be squeezed dry. Someone like Duque, who was not strong enough, would probably be contaminated by the evil inside. This was something that only warlocks could play with. Unless Duque wanted to become a ghoul, he would have to politely decline it. Even a warlock would need to pay a high price of vitality to activate it. The last one was Alexstrasza. Dragons were all proud fellows, not to mention Alexstrasza, one of the 5 great dragon aspects. Before going through history, the Great Red Dragon Queen was very, very difficult to serve. Not only did they treat him like an ancestor, they even made things difficult for him. It would be harder than ascending to the heavens for her to make a move. If the opponent's level wasn't high enough, he wouldn't make a move. Even if the opponent's level was high enough, he would only make a move if he was in a good mood. Unless it was an enemy super boss that concerned the life and death of the entire world, don't even think about her taking the initiative to attack. The price to hire the Red Dragon Queen was very high. After being tormented once, everything would be fine. As long as it involved demons, Alexstrasza would rush to do any dirty or tiring work. Of course, there was no need to worry that Her Majesty the Queen might lose her chastity in human form after being captured. The beast men liked heavy tastes. All of you shallow humans get excited when you see the measurements of 36, 24, and 36. The beast men thought that they were all skin and bones and would not be able to reproduce. His skin isn't green. I don't like it. I won't accept anyone whose measurements are not 40, 40, or 40. Do you know what a heavy taste is? Alexstrasza's human form was like Sister Phoenix to the beast men. If they insisted on forcing their way over, wouldn't that make their beast men brothers uncomfortable? With so many factors in play, Duque decided to let Alexstrasza suffer a temporary tragedy. Of course, Duque would not let the Red Dragons do as they pleased. On the opposite side of Gershak's farm in the Arthi Highlands, a large group of red dragons gathered in a circle on the ground. Zastan, my request is that you don't return to the Red Dragon Queen's side for now. Don't become slaves of the Horde again and fight against the other races in the world of Azeroth. As a price, I promise to save your Queen Alexstrasza from the control of Demon's Soul within a year. Zastan was the only young dragon among this group of red dragons who was closest to becoming a giant dragon. He was already 980 years old and had yet to step into the realm of giant dragons. However, compared to most of the young dragons who had not even touched the threshold of transforming into human form, he was already worthy of being the leader. Zastan stretched his long snake-like neck. His huge golden eyes were like 2 lava balls with flowing flames, flickering with a complicated divine light. Human, thank you for providing us with these mysterious devices, allowing us to temporarily escape the sorrowful shackles sent by our king. This does not mean that we have to believe you. Your ability is not enough to fight against Demon's Soul. If there is no better, more convincing reason, even if we know that we will be enslaved, we still have to rush back to our Lord's side. From Zastan's mouth that was full of fangs flowed a sorrowful sigh. At this moment, Duque said a giant dragon's name that was taboo in the entire dragon race. Nesario. What? I happen to know of Nesario's plan. Duque walked over and said to Zastan. After a moment, not only Zastan, but all the red dragon's expressions were very interesting. Are you sure? Compared to the freedom of Her Majesty the Queen, this price is not too much, right? Moreover, I am Duke Marcus. I once fought alongside you, suppressed Karazhan's magic defense system, and finally blasted Sargeras, who possessed the Guardian Mediv, into the abyss. I am Duke Marcus. I think that the friendship of fighting alongside you should be able to increase our trust in each other. Zastan's dragon eyes widened. It was you at that time? When they besieged Karazhan, Zastan was undoubtedly a junior. He would never forget Karazhan's terrifying and wonderful firepower that ultimately proved to be a false alarm. A video was projected in Duque's hand. It was an edited video that had been found through a system search. It happened to let Zastan see himself. Looking at the flying maneuvers that only he was familiar with, Zastan was completely speechless. Alright, warrior who defeated the Demon King Sargeras, I think we all have reason to believe you. However, what do you intend to do with us? The order that has been branded in our hearts is that when we encounter orcs, we have to obey their orders. We can't fight orcs at all. Duque smiled mysteriously. Are you interested in coming to Karazhan to fight demons? However, maintaining the power of the teleportation gate will require you to put in some effort. The large group of red dragons grinned in unison. It's my pleasure. Just like that, Duque sent the red dragons away. Teleporting huge creatures like the dragon race consumed a lot of magic power. The teleportation of more than 100 red dragons had almost drained their own, Duque's, and the entire Storm Royal Mage team's magic power. After it was done, Duque was no different from a dead dog. He lay on the ground with his arms and legs wide open. Wuxia also felt her calves and stomach trembling as she walked. It was purely her ladylike willpower that supported her not to make a fool of herself. However, when she came to Duque's side, she still carefully bent her legs and sat down. For some reason, seeing Duque lying so lazily, Wuxia had the illusion that she was having a picnic with her family that she hadn't had in a long time. Teacher Marcos. Call me Duque. Duque. Chief Lothar is at the South Stream coast asking if there is any possibility of reinforcements on our side. He's being attacked by the main force of 200,000 Horde, and his forces are very limited. Right now, Lothar's army is barely defending the Xiaofan castle, and waiting for reinforcements from Lordaeron. Do you see the chieftain's flag of Orgrim? No, but, then tell Lothar that I'm sure Orgrim is on my side. If he wants reinforcements, go find Terina's, not me. Alright. Chapter 321. To the west of the northern continent, the South Stream coast and the North Stream coast formed a long arc, so long that it was almost impossible to see the end. To the south was the mountain where the heart of the kingdom of Gilneas was, while to the north it stretched on as if there was no end. From the west to the east, it felt like the whole world was divided by a few vertical lines, like the undulating horizon hanging in the sky. A long artificial green line outlined the boundary between the sea and the land, and the last line was the silver-white line of the human sea. The waves of the sea surged towards the shore, like a plane eager to expand into the land, and that bright green was its vanguard. Every time the waves retreated back into the sea, they would carry a terrible dark red. Xiaofan Citadel, which was close to the sea, was like a lone island in the vast ocean. In reality, it was not small, but only this huge object of reference could serve as a foil to the vastness of the battlefield. What was reflected in the eyes of the human commanders on the fortress tower was two armies engaged in a life-and-death battle. The high walls of the fortress blocked out most of the shouting, and if anyone poked their head out of the fortress's firing ports or iron windows, the earth-shattering sound wave that swept over them like a tidal wave would probably knock them unconscious in an instant. A green tide filled the entire coastline. That was an uncountable number of orcs. Because the Alliance's fleet had sent half of the transport ships to the bottom of the sea to feed the fish, in theory there were only about 200,000 orcs on the South Stream coast. However, this figure of more than 200,000 was just an imaginary figure. No one knew how many of these so-called 200,000 orcs were the elites of the top 10 clans, and whether there were really only 200,000. Or were there mostly orc laborers? Not only did the humans not know, even the horde commanders themselves did not know. They only had one order for the orcs who had successfully reached the shore: charge in the direction of the rising sun. Yes, charge to the east. A simple and violent order. When the number of an army was so large that it could not be described in any human language, the simplest order was the most effective. In theory, the alliance's defense would be weaker the further north they went. But in a situation where all of Kurtiraz's warships were gathered, from the Baradine Bay to the southwest corner of the northern continent were all Bloodsails and Stormwind warships. Being able to reach the shore was already a victory. Apart from the huge main ship, the tribe had also built a batch of medium-sized battleships for assault. These ships, whose ultimate purpose was to fight hand-to-hand, also caused considerable trouble for the Alliance fleet. In the end, General Dahlan settled everything and began hunting the Horde's transport ships. There were simply too many beastmen piled up on the shores of the South Flow Sea, making it impossible for all of the tribe's warriors to stand on land at the same time. Tens of thousands of orcs huddled together in chest-ankle-deep water. They filled all the space, even climbing on the heads of their own people. Any artillery shell could plow a bloody trail of death in the shallow water. They were like an endless army of demons emerging from the abyss, ready to devour everything in their path. Near the sea, several patches of forest separated by preset fire belts had already been set on fire. The flames blocked the tribe's advance. However, there were too many orcs in the horde. Almost at every moment, there would be orcs being pushed by the orcs from behind into the forest filled with death flames and being burned alive. The orcs had no choice. They had seen what the humans were capable of. When the human fleets no longer focused on sinking the transport ships, the small grapeshot cannons that could scatter a large number of tiny metal lumps would reap the lives of the orcs who dared to stay by the shore. If they wanted to live, they had to advance and defeat everything that stood in their way. Setting fire in the forest could only be done once. The burnt trees could not be burned again before they grew back. Lothar had no other choice. In places where there was no way to set fire, a few remaining flags of the Rotterdam struggled to hold on in the green tide. Looking at the lines of soldiers that had become scattered, Lothar knew very well that it was only a matter of time before they were completely drowned by the green tide. On the front line near the beach, the famous infantry corps of the Alliance lined up in a row. They had long prepared a line of defense that was formed by antlers, deep trenches, and multiple huge fences to resist the tribe's attack. They were the 1st to 5th Corps of the Rotterdam. The Rotterdam's corps were the largest, and usually, there were less than 20,000 people in a corps. Of course, their weapons and equipment were also the best. It was not an exaggeration to say that on a flat battlefield, one of the Rotterdam's corps was equivalent to 2 of the other country's corps. Behind the Rotterdam's army, there were Dalagen's 1st to 20th Infantry Corps, Gilnes's 1st to 24th Infantry Corps, Alterac's 1st and 2nd Corps. However, everyone knew that if the strongest people of the Rotterdam Kingdom could not withstand it, the infantries of the other countries would only be depleted faster. In the command center of the Xiaofan citadel. Crazy. Crazy. The orcs are King crazy. King Xian of Gilnes cursed loudly. Calm down, Xian. If this place collapses, you can still hide in the mountains. If we lose here, we won't be able to hold on to half of Rotterdam. King Turinas, who had also arrived at the front line early in the morning, angrily hit the edge of the heavy command table with his king's scepter. Beyond the line of defense, the entire silver pine forest would be defenseless. The horde could go south and attack the center of the Gilnes kingdom, which was located at the southwest corner of the northern continent, about 300 meters above sea level. If they went east, they could reach the Dalajan on the southern shore of Lake Lord Emir. If they headed north, they would be able to attack the Tirisful woodlands, which had a slightly higher terrain, where the Rotterdam kingdom was located. Gilneas took up less than a third of the Silverpine forest, and the rest was Rotterdam's territory. This was one of the most important food-producing areas. If the South Flow Coast's line of defense was broken, it would definitely be a heavy blow to the alliance. Antonidas. Lothar had to look at the leader of the Dalajan military, who had the most ability to change the situation. Antonidas had also come out to deal with the horde's attack. He had brought a total of 5 mages and 40,000 infantry. This was the limit of what he could bring. In the most critical moment, the mages had already used a large number of firewall to help the alliance stabilize the front line. Now that they have used too much magic, what they need the most is rest. Otherwise, continuing to fight will only burn their magic circuits. By tomorrow, you won't even need a single mage. Pharaoh was strong, but he was using his life as a sacrifice. What could you do? The king of Tyrrhenas was obviously frantic. Who else has a solution? I will marry Kalia to him. Chapter 322. The horde was already weak. Lothar, who had the most experience in fighting the horde, knew this very well. Although the orc warriors were better equipped than before, their combat power was declining. The first batch of orcs that Stormwind faced were all masters of combat. Any reckless attack would result in death. Any delay in reaction would result in death. Any failure in a battle of strength would result in death. According to Duke, they had just experienced a war with an unknown race called the Drenii, and they were elites who had been through hundreds of battles. Not only did they know how to use all their advantages, but their combat talent was also unparalleled. In the face of such elites, the Stormwind Kingdom's soldiers were often beaten by a ratio of 1 to 10. However, after experiencing the burning of Stormwind City and the 2 sea landings, it was difficult for Lothar to see a large number of orcs of such quality. Here at the South Stream coast, Lothar estimated that the ratio of orcs to humans had dropped to 1 to 3. This was because the orcs lacked warlock support, and the humans had almost all the mages who knew how to fight. It was like a critical point now, and whoever made it through would win. If the alliance could not hold on this time, then the orcs would have a large number of elites who had experienced blood and fire. Even a laborer who only knew how to use a wooden hammer would grow into a terrifying killing machine. On the contrary, the well-trained alliance troops, such as the soldiers of Lordaeron and Gilneas, would grow rapidly. Just a little bit more, just a little bit more. However, Lothar had already sent out the best troops he could. The elites of the Silver Hand Knights, led by Uther, were also dealing with the powerhouses of the horde. Other than sending himself, there was nothing Lothar could do. It was no wonder that Tyrrhenas was so anxious. If not for the fact that Tyrrhenas was still somewhat clear-headed and knew that it was useless to send out cavalry in this situation, he would probably have sent out the rest of his knights. Suddenly, a voice sounded. Deputy Commander Marcus sent me a message. If the situation is not good, we can use the FFF Tactical Strike Force. The one who spoke was Duquesne's butler, Makarov. In terms of strength, Makarov was nothing. In terms of ability, he didn't have any outstanding points, but his slickness and responsibility made him the most well-known mouthpiece under Duquesne's command. On many occasions, he was even Duquesne's full representative, and every word and action represented Duquesne's attitude. Now that he had appeared, he was like a fresh stream in the stagnant Alliance command center. What? Duquesne has a way? King Tyrrhenas grabbed Makarov's shoulder in surprise. This is just an experimental weapon. It hasn't been tested in actual combat, but my lord has said that we can try it when necessary. Even if Duquesne's original words were, "Send them out when they're about to collapse," Makarov still left some leeway for him to speak. What is the FFF regiment? Lothar was suspicious. It wasn't that he didn't trust Duque, but he was using him as an excuse to let Makarov explain to everyone. I think it's a strange language called fire, fire, fire or something. In the common language, it means fire, fire, fire. Lothar's teeth ached when he heard Duque's backup plan. Alright, let's not talk about it. Just tell me how you want us to cooperate. Do you want me to order for the cannons to be moved? In Lothar's and the other leaders' minds, something that could be used as a backup plan must be something huge and terrifying. Makarov waved his hand. No, we have a full set of preparations. At the front line, the alliance was losing ground. Another line of defense that used the wooden fence as the core was completely destroyed. High Lord Mograine used a large machete to kill an orc that tried to ambush him. After cutting the orc in half, he quickly scanned the defensive line and grabbed a messenger not far away from him. He shouted, "Form a defensive team. Retreat to the sixth fence and regroup." The soldier nodded and raised his horn. He blew 2 short blasts, then another 3 long blasts. Upon hearing this voice, the captains of each team and the officers of the middle ranks all shouted orders to their own troops. They gathered their soldiers and formed small phalanxes as they retreated, making sure that the orcs couldn't catch up to them at once. Turning around and running would be courting death. If they weren't careful, it would turn into a rout. No matter how fast the 1.8-meter-tall humans ran, their short legs wouldn't be able to outrun the orcs, who were more than 2 meters tall. The horde tried to break through the retreating phalanx, but the alliance soldiers stood together and held their weapons firmly, stabbing at any orc that got close. Even when they were retreating, every team raised their shields and linked them together to ensure that every heavy blow from the orcs had at least 3 people taking it at the same time. The small shield wall was moving. The orcs kept attacking the squads with absolute numbers. If they were lucky, they could knock over the soldiers. Once they fell, there was basically no chance for them to get back up. The orcs would definitely swarm over to finish them off. Fortunately, most of the alliance soldiers were able to successfully retreat to the next line of defense. Looking at the sky, Mograine couldn't hide his worry. This won't do. Before nightfall, the entire coastal defensive line will collapse. Mograine was deeply worried as he looked at the setting sun. The craftsmen were already frantically adding fences and setting up antlers, but the new defensive line would definitely not be as stable as the old ones. If they couldn't stop the horde's offensive before nightfall and turn the battle into positional warfare, then the humans, who were at a disadvantage in terms of individual combat power, would clearly suffer a crushing defeat at night. At this moment, several dazzling flames shot out from behind Mograine, sprinkling down from the sky in the middle of the battlefield. Clearly, this had nothing to do with magic or mysticism. Mograine turned his head and saw a group of Duke Marcus's private soldiers standing at the next line of defense in Stormwind. It was a long, dazzling light that lasted longer than the flames of wizards. More than 10 tongues of flame extended from the watchtowers, setting half of the battlefield ablaze. The dazzling light of the flames made all other colors on the battlefield seem to dim, even outshining the sunlight that had begun to fade. Fear of fire was practically the most primitive instinct of all land creatures. Their fear originated from the fires in primeval forests billions of years ago. From the moment there were forest fires, the fear of fire was deeply rooted in the genes of land creatures. The horde's frenzied attack came to a halt for a moment. Mograine finally had the chance to see the symbols on the strange alliance soldiers. They were 3 consecutive, identical symbols. FFF. Chapter 323. There were no swords, nor were there any glaring runes. There were only strange jars. No, strange was not the right word, because Mograine recognized them. They were firemen's water pumps. Fire was definitely the nightmare of any big city. A single flame could turn an entire area into ashes in the scorching summer or the cool autumn weather. In this era where houses were built with bricks and wood, fire protection was the most important thing in every city. The water pump was a treasure passed down from the dwarves. A large bucket of water placed on a four-wheeled cart that was half the height of a person and a pump that was pushed back and forth by human hands could walk through any narrow streets and alleys and spray water onto any house that was on fire. Mograine did not know what these water pumps were spraying, but he was sure that it was not water. On every watchtower, there were one or two men, sweating profusely, lifting and pressing the handle of the water pump, exerting pressure on the liquid inside, causing it to spray out. A torch placed in front of the nozzle was enough to ignite the oil. To put it bluntly, this was no different from those fire-breathing entertainers. However, Duque was definitely the first to use this thing on a large scale on the battlefield. Standing on the tallest tower of the Xiaofan citadel, the leaders of the alliance were stunned. The Xiaofan citadel was 3 kilometers away from the coastal defense line, but they could clearly see the flames landing on the battlefield, turning many beast men into human torches, and turning half of the battlefield into a fiery hell. The beast men tried to save their comrades by slapping them, but when they touched the oil, the flames spread to them as well. Even when they jumped into the water, the flames were still floating on the surface of the sea, not extinguished. Ancestors above. This is the flame of a demon. No, this is not the end of a warrior. As black smoke billowed into the air, a terrifying shockwave swept across the entire horde. What is this? Tyrrhena's reached out a trembling finger. The shaking finger betrayed the shock in his heart. It's just some whale oil. Makarov humbly bowed his head to the king of Lordaeron. But I have to remind the Alliance commander Lothar and the other generals that we've burned 30,000 gold coins worth of fuel in that short period of time. In fact, if we hold on for another 10 minutes, we will be forced to stop attacking. Lothar was a little embarrassed. When he was in Storm City, he heard that Duque had so much whale fat that he could use it to light lamps for the poor. Of course, Lothar had also become bad recently. He was fed up with the ugly behavior of the kings and nobles who were stingy when there was nothing to do, and screamed when there was something to do. Lothar would definitely be happy to see Tyrrhena's get into trouble. Didn't they see that Tyrrhena's Menethil was even willing to sell his princess? With the threat of the core territory being destroyed, a mere 1,000,000 gold coins shouldn't be a problem, right? Since Lothar did not expose him, the rest of Makarov's excuse was useless. Originally, Duque had told him that the method of oil purification was very expensive. That's right. It was just a matter of adding a few more layers of filters. Of course, other than Duque and Makarov, no one else knew about this secret, nor would they try to understand it. They would never have thought that oil could be used in this way, or that fire pumps could be used to spray fire. They would never have thought that oil could be used in this way, or that there was an endless supply of fuel to replace whale oil. This was the so-called limitations of the era. Ignorance, arrogance, and arrogance had blinded the eyes of most people, and the minds of the mages were only filled with knowledge that was limited to the mystical realm. They were bound by the so-called common sense that had not changed for thousands of years. As for Duque, as a transmigrator, Duque was the perfect person to guide them. The horde was indeed very strong. Humans once thought that unless they had a complete defense line or more than 5 times the number of soldiers, it would be impossible to defeat the orcs on land. But right now, the enemy that was unparalleled in the eyes of countless generals and wise men was being crushed by an army that was completely foreign to this world. The orcs were invincible in hand-to-hand combat. They only needed to know how to advance, using their strong bodies and sturdy weapons to destroy everything in front of them, and then the humans would definitely be defeated. At this moment, the humans had subverted their common sense. It had nothing to do with courage or personal combat ability. This was simple knowledge of physics and chemistry, and it completely defeated the orcs. They lost the courage to charge forward madly, and even launched fatal attacks against their compatriots who pushed and shoved them. Just to escape from this hell of flames. The orcs stopped attacking the entire front line from south to north. They gave up on attacking the high mountains of Gilneas, and they also gave up on breaking through the Alliance's coastal defense line. They turned north, following the beach all the way to the North Stream coast, looking for a chance to break through the coastal defense line and enter the Silverpine Forest. We held it. Whether it was High Lord Mograine at the front line, or Noxus and the other Alliance leaders at the Xiaofan castle, they all let out a long sigh of relief. It was nighttime, and fighting at night was even more disadvantageous to the humans. The Alliance could only give up on counterattacking the beach and drive all the orcs into the sea to feed the fish. A night of truce. When the next morning came, the Alliance was dumbfounded. In the morning fog, along the coastline, there was a tall wall. No one expected the orc leader to be so smart. More than 200,000 orcs dismantled all the transport ships in one night, and then used the wood of the ships to build a coastal defense line consisting of 3 wooden fences. Not only did they build a defense line, but the horde also changed the direction of their main attack. When Noxus was attacked by the horde, all the elites of the top 10 clans attacked Sebrature. Noxus' face turned green. King Tyrrhenas did not even know when he dropped the scepter in his hand, and stood there in a daze. The Dark Portal 2, 1st of April. On this day that Duque felt was quite ironic, the horde used the Blackrock clan's orcs, who had high fire resistance, as the vanguard, and took down the small town of Sebrature in one fell swoop. They built a huge stronghold in Sebrature, and used the stronghold as a foothold to fight against the Alliance. After not being able to break through the royal guards of Lordaeron, the leader of the horde army was worried. If they went north, they would not be able to take down Lordaeron's Tirisful defense line. If they went east, they would not be able to take down Lordaeron's Tirisful defense line. If they went south, the entire Xiaofan castle was the best nail. It was there, and the horde could not advance. Chapter 324. FFF Dragon Breath Launcher, also known as Dragon Breath Launcher. In the 2 years at the Dark Portal, there was nothing more significant than this. This was the first time in human history that a cheap technological product had surpassed the field of magic. Although it had many limitations, such as the inconvenience of transportation and the difficulty of oil extraction, no one could deny that without this thing, the horde would have fought their way to Lordaeron and demanded King Tyrrhenas to come out and cut off his own head for the orcs to kick as a ball. Regardless of whether King Tyrrhenas admitted it or not, Duque had once again saved him and the Alliance. Of course, there were still many side effects to this thing. For example, the burning smell that lingered on the battlefield like a haze. For example, whenever the word burning was mentioned in the camp, a group of people would immediately vomit. Oh, it was vomiting and diarrhea, vomiting and vomiting until they threw up yesterday's breakfast. The camp had to provide only vegetarian food for 3 consecutive days. Also, without a big heart, it would be impossible to control this terrifying dragon breath launcher. Lothar ran to praise the group of heroes who had saved the Alliance. He was surprised to find that all the flamethrowers were the storm veterans who had retired due to injuries. Perhaps they had a broken arm or a crippled leg. According to the previous methods, they would either become useless and wait for death, or be abandoned during the retreat. My wife was torn in half by an orc, and my child was burned alive by an orc in the church. I am very grateful to Sir Marcus, he gave me a second life, so I can let those damned green-skinned creatures have a taste of their own medicine. I was in the militia with my son at the time. I saw my son's neck bitten by a dying orc, and he fell into a burning house with my own eyes. Since these beasts have caused my child to suffer unbearable pain, please allow me to send the flames of hell to these people who should all go to hell. Unparalleled hatred had forged their tenacious will. Even if this immature weapon had all sorts of problems, they still chose to pick up the flamethrowers in their hands. Lothar was in awe. On the other hand, the Dalajan were the most enthusiastic about this revolutionary weapon. Even though they frantically asked Duque to unconditionally disclose all the data of the Dragon Breath launcher, Makarov was neither humble nor arrogant. Unconditionally disclose? Sure. First, he had the Dalajan library make everything from Breaking Dawn grimoires to Acolytes' handbooks free of charge. We can think about it. This is impossible. Then, this is also the answer of my lord, the youngest Morning Star Wizard, Duke of Stormwind Karazhan, Vice-Commander of the Alliance, His Excellency Duke Marcus. This is impossible. Makarov's reply was incomparably official, especially after he pointed out Duke's esteemed identity. It infuriated Dalaran and the other archmages. If it had been someone else, the Dalajan might have also made up his mind to frame him. However, don't forget that Duque was backed by Anduin and Lang. Lothar was the commander of the Alliance, Rin was the king of Stormwind, and behind them was an almost complete Stormwind. Hundreds of thousands of soldiers and civilians lived next door to the Dalajan. If you dare to make a move, we will overturn the Alliance and destroy the Dalajan first. Everyone in Makarov's FFF team was reliable, but no matter how reliable they were, it was easy for them to make mistakes in continuous battles. The Dalajan and the damned goblins had gotten their hands on a broken set of flamethrowers. However, their replicas had all failed, and there had been a few explosions or fires. The Dalajan had lost a few alchemy masters, and the goblins. Alright, the crazy goblins had lost a full 3 digits of researchers. No one understood why there were so many problems with the seemingly simple system. Firstly, there was the fuel. Fuel that had not been purified would easily block the nozzle, and under the constant pressure of the pump, the result would be an explosion. In theory, a less combustible fuel like kerosene would have the same burning effect. However, there was no concept of oil purification in this era. Even the kerosene used for gas lamps had a lot of impurities. Normal lighting was fine, but once pressure was applied, it would be strange if it did not explode. Moreover, Duque's fuel had been adjusted for viscosity. It was too thin, and did not have the effect of burning when it touched the body. It was too sticky, and could easily be stuffed in a jar and burst. Secondly, there was the pressure. Apart from using the pump to compress the air, the liquid could be ejected further. Duque also added a small wind magic formation. Once it was pressed, air would be injected into the jar. Thirdly, there was the nozzle. The nozzle was specially designed to gradually shrink in order to increase the range. Moreover, the nozzle was specially designed to prevent the liquid from flowing back, and the valve would be closed the moment it stopped. If they did not do that, the flames would follow the liquid out and burn back into the fuel barrel, and it would still explode. There was also a set of strict operating procedures, as well as safety measures such as removing the nozzle and the pipes of the compression tank when abandoning the broken flamethrower. It would be strange if they could make a random imitation. After fiddling with it for a whole week, no one could replicate it. Be it the Rotterdam or the Dalajan, they could only pinch their noses and accept it. They had no choice but to rent Duque's flamethrower team for 10,000 gold a month. At first, Turinas wanted to use the name of the Alliance to pressure Duque. However, Duque argued, "Your Majesty, you're wrong. I'm not trying to cheat you of your money, but the cost of refining the fuel is just that high. This is just the cost of the fuel. Without money, I can't make fuel." Duque personally brought Turinas, Mograine, and the others to visit a refinery that had 18 jars that were taller than a person. Seeing that hundreds of workers had only managed to squeeze out a small amount of fuel after working for half an hour, Turinas was discouraged. If they didn't pay, would they still defend the 200-kilometer line of defense from the Silverpine Forest to the Tirisful Woodlands? How many people would be enough to fill it with lives? Moreover, half of the Silverpine Forest was now occupied by the Horde, and Tyrrhena's was already annoyed to death by the nobles who had lost their territories. Those people squatted in front of the palace gate every day, screaming as if their entire family had died. At night, they would go to the state guesthouse to get free food and drinks. They would do whatever they wanted, do whatever they wanted. If he paid, he would feel the pinch. There were 4 heavily guarded mountain passes, and it would be impossible to clear them all without 2 million gold coins a month. However, Duque refused to marry Princess Kalia, so Tyrrhena's great plot of "what belongs to the son-in-law is mine" could not succeed. Chapter 325. After haggling for a long time, Tyrrhena's accepted Duque's preferential package, only 1.6 million Arathar gold coins per month. Half of it could be owed, the other half had to be paid in cash, and the rest could be mortgaged with precious art or precious gold. In exchange, Duque provided 300 FFF flamethrower teams, promising that as long as the flamethrowers did not die, he would try his best to repair the flamethrowers that were damaged under normal use, as well as provide all the fuel needed for the battle. Ilusia did not understand Duque's approach. "Teacher, Duque, why are you doing this?" Ilusia had seen with her own eyes how Duque twisted a valve under the tank that was about to release the finished fuel, and then a huge amount of fuel flowed out of the huge tank next to it. That flow made Ilusia think of exaggerated words like "a broken dam" and "a deteriorating river." Ilusia blinked and looked at the strange square inscriptions engraved on the flamethrower gun. As long as the valve was pressed, the inscriptions would glow with a yellow magical light. Or is it that the biggest cost of producing the FFF artificial dragon's breath launchers are these mysterious inscriptions? Duque glanced at the inscriptions on it and blushed, which was a rare sight. Written on it were some Chinese characters, such as "burn. Burn. Burn all of them. Ha ha ha. Die lovers. Traitors who betray the Single Dog Alliance must all be burned to death. This is Master Duque's original. Goblin pirated dogs, die." Duque coughed hard and put on a serious face. "Well, those are anti-theft items. Once the inscriptions are damaged, it will affect the operation of the launchers. Of course, that's not the most important thing. Duque touched Ilusia's head. "I'm very happy that you did not leak the secret of the dragon's breath launchers. Actually, I'm not just thinking about this war anymore. The war will end with the humans' victory. The only difference is how much we win and how much each country has to pay. So, I've already started planning for the post-war." Post-war. Ilusia's eyes widened in shock. What a far-sighted plan. While the orcs were attacking like fire and the whole continent was still in a quagmire of war, when every human could not see the future clearly, Duque was already thinking of keeping the strongest alliance, Lordaeron, in check after the war. If this was true, then his father was not on the same level as Duque. Duque looked into the distance. His black eyes became incomparably deep, like the endless starry sky. It gave Ilusia a feeling that she would never be able to see through him, but she would unknowingly fall into it. The big hand that was caressing her head felt a strange sense of warmth in the warmth. How many years had it been? Not even his closest family had been so affectionate to him. His father was cold and heartless, and he only looked at the scales of benefits. Mother was busy with magic. The 2 younger brothers were already like sharks in their mother's womb, beginning to cultivate each other's forces, preparing to devour each other in the future, and Duque, the young mage who claimed to be her master, gave her the warmth that she had longed for a long time. In her heart, Ilusia sighed. Sigh, if only Duque was my husband. Peace of mind, safety. But he will definitely not accept me. Father's asking price is something that even the king cannot afford. Ilusia was very clear about her bastard father's character. For the sake of the family's interests, he would definitely use her marriage to maximize the benefits of the Barov family. Lowering her head lightly, Elusia let out a silent sigh. In Thurbercher's horde's camp, Grom Hellscream let out a deep sigh as well. For the first time, he felt a heavy burden on his shoulders. He had thought that only 200,000 of the 400,000 orcs that crossed the sea from the Western Front would be able to destroy the humans of the entire northern continent. With the new transport ships that had been modified by the goblins, the horde had a total of 320,000 orcs that had successfully landed, and 250,000 of them were warriors. Grom had thought that victory was in the bag. Who knew that the humans would come up with some kind of fire-breathing weapon? They did not know what it was, but once they came into contact with that sticky thing, they could only wait for their entire body to burn. Apart from the Blackrock tribe who were naturally resistant to fire, the others would most likely die if they came into contact with it. In order to save on the food that was transported from the transport ships, Grom had to order the injured to take the lead in every attack to reduce the enemy's firepower. The only fortunate thing was that the enemy did not have too many fire-breathing devices, and their range was not too far. Even from the archer towers, they could only shoot about 20 meters away. If they were on the ground, it would be even closer. First, they would use long-range weapons like catapults to attack. At the risk of sacrificing some of their people, they could still pull the humans into close combat. However, every time they were about to win and kill most of the humans, these disgusting fire-breathing weapons would appear. Every time the horde failed, the horde would fail. Now, the area around Thurbercher had become a meat grinder. Tens of thousands of Alliance and Horde members died here every day. Sensing light footsteps behind him, Grom did not even turn around. What's the situation at the back? Sword Saint Samuro appeared from the blurry air. Gul'dan has gathered more compatriots from the Door of Darkness. Although their combat power has decreased, at least they have made up for it in terms of numbers. Rend Blackhand and his brother are now leading 300,000 beastmen to attack the Arthi Highlands. Humph. Even I can't break through that bridge. Can those two brats from the Blackhand family do it? Grom was ferocious, but if he met someone who could take 3 blows from him without dying, he would not be able to do anything. This person was a militia captain named Prince of Torbane. No. It's not just attacking from the bridge. Gul'dan suggests that we fill in the strait. Fill in the strait? Didn't you say it was impossible? Indeed, the horde had tried before, but the moment they threw rocks or clods, they would be swept away. After a few days, the rapid strait did not seem to be narrowing at all, so the horde gave up. No, Gul'dan got inspiration from the humans blocking our transport ships. He told Rend Blackhand that the rocks weren't big enough. As long as we throw a big enough rock, we can still block the strait. Rend did as he was told and is now reinforcing the strait. Grom was stunned. All right, I have to say, the humans are a smart race. It's a pity we finally have Gul'dan on our side. Sealing the strait and creating a passageway for the army to pass through will take about 2 weeks. All right, then I'll nail the main force of the humans here. Flames burned in Grom's eyes. Chapter 326. After discovering that crossing the sea wasn't a good choice, the orcs who learned that they could fill the straits and cross the sea regarded this as their highest priority. On the entire 200-kilometer stretch of the straits that separated the northern and southern continents and was now known as the Solder Straits, there were orc laborers pushing boulders to fill the sea. 108,109,110. When Lilith killed the orcs from the other side of the river and counted down to 110, she frowned. The dragon cavalry came again. More red dragons, more Dragonmaw tribe orcs. The Alliance couldn't do anything to them. After all, the Alliance lacked a powerful air force that could fight against the red dragon cavalry. There weren't many griffins left, and they were at an absolute disadvantage in terms of quality. Recklessly resisting was equivalent to courting death. In Duque's impression, the only ones who could deal with the orc cavalry without hurting the red dragons were the night elves Hippogryphon cavalry from another continent. What a pity, the night elves' indifferent attitude meant that they wouldn't participate in this war. Duque had to let Aurelia, Servanas, and Lillis each lead 300 rangers to deal with the Dragon Maw tribe's agile attacks. However, the entire bay was being filled up at a speed visible to the naked eye. Duque felt like he had shot himself in the foot. If he had let the Horde's transport ships go, there wouldn't have been so much trouble. Maybe the Horde would still foolishly collect ships to continue crossing the sea. Duque's flamethrower couldn't do much here. Because he had the genuine dragon breath. How passive a war without air supremacy was. Duque, Aurelia, and the Alliance bosses on Stormguard's side all felt it deeply. Duque, my intuition tells me that you've already predicted something. What are you waiting for? Aurelia took advantage of the fact that there was no one around to catch Duque. Duque had evaded the first attack with a flash, and then activated Ice Barrier to break the Great Demon King's trap, but he was still caught by the other Demon King. Servanas took advantage of the moment when Duque's Ice Barrier's absolute defense ended to descend from the tree like a ghost, his hand reaching over to grab Duque's ear. Don't. I surrender. Outside the grove, Gavin Rad, who was technically a bodyguard, blew a whistle to indicate that he couldn't see or hear anything. In the forest. Resistance is severe. Tell the truth and you'll be lenient. The Windrunner sisters used the words they learned from Duque and used them on Duque. Duque was speechless. Duque was unyielding. Humph. Someone still owes me a lot of good brother. If I don't clear my debt first, there's no deal. But the bastard's pretentiousness only lasted for a while. After all, this involved the Windrunner family, so Duque didn't keep them in suspense for too long. It's been 8 days since the second sea crossing battle, and we haven't found Orgrim's flag. This doesn't fit Orgrim's character. I'm 70% sure that Orgrim has personally led his army across the sea. Then, where is he? If I'm not wrong, he should be here with no more than 50,000 Horde elites. Duque opened the map he carried with him and pointed at the hinterlands. The Windrunner sisters didn't look too good. This is both a good and a bad thing. Duque paused for a moment. The good thing is that the Horde will definitely anger another dwarf branch that lives in Eagle Nest Mountain, the Wildhammer Dwarves. The Wildhammer Dwarves are good friends with the Griffins that breed in Eagle Nest Mountain. Their Griffin Knights were also quite famous. Now we don't have to worry about not having an air force. Aurelia's expression became even worse. The bad thing is that the Horde has gone behind the main force of the Alliance. The Silverpine Forest was to the west, the hinterlands to the east, and the Arthy Highlands to the south. The Alliance was surrounded on 3 sides. No, I'm not worried about that. The Wildhammer Dwarves are very strong. As long as we have enough reinforcements, the Horde will definitely be able to withstand the attack. The problem is, after that, if the elites of the Horde can't go west. The two sisters' gazes followed Duque's finger to the north. That was the hinterland of Lordaeron. If they passed through Saradan in the hinterlands, they would be able to reach the holy city of Stratholme. Is the Horde going to attack Stratholme? Queen Sylvie asked. No. They can't take Stratholme. Right now, the Holy Light Archbishop Fael is mass-producing Holy Saya in Stratholme. There's half of the Silver Hand Knights there, and Stratholme's defense is comparable to Lordaeron's. As long as the Horde can't take them down, they will be surrounded and killed. They will be surrounded and killed by the endless stream of humans coming to defend the Holy City. Then, I'm worried about your hometown, Cuel Salis. At this time, the two sisters looked at Duque as if he was an idiot. Aurelia put her hands on her hips like a proud rooster. The entire forest of Cuel Salis has a magic shield. Those stupid trolls won't be able to break in even if they spend another 10,000 years. Queen Sylvie also put her hands on her hips and puffed out her chest, as if she was right. Have you forgotten that the Horde actually has warlocks? There's a rough description of the magic shield of your forest in the books of Karazhan. If you use runestones, as long as enough power is used to corrode a few of the runestones in the key parts of your forest, the magic shield that protects the entire forest will be a joke. When Duque said this, the faces of the two Windrunner sisters had completely lost all color. They were deathly pale. As the Ranger Generals of Kuel Salis, of course, they knew the secrets of the magic shield of the forest. The daily maintenance of the runestones was also carried out under their eyes. If they did not know Duque very well, Aurelia and her sister would definitely think that Duque was a spy sent by the trolls. And Duque's last words extinguished the last bit of hope in the hearts of the two Windrunner sisters. According to my calculations, the worst-case scenario is that the trolls choose to join the Horde. Then Kuel Salis will face a disaster. From the bottom of their hearts, the Windrunner sisters did not want to believe Duque's deduction. But along the way, when had Duque's deduction of the big picture ever been wrong? Their slim bodies were trembling. Duque stepped forward and put one hand on each of their shoulders. You've done enough for the Alliance. While the situation has not collapsed, quickly go back and warn Kuel Salis. Also, remember to evacuate your parents and third sister to Silvermoon City. That's the only safer place. Chapter 327. Aurelia bit her lip. What about the line of defense along the strait? Duque shook his head. Everyone knows that we can't hold it. In fact, 90% of the people in the Arthi Highlands have retreated to Torrentberg. Even if we give up the Arthi Highlands, the Alliance can still hold on for a long time. We don't have to worry about the Horde taking the opportunity to invade the Hillsbrad Hills. After all, there is the Thoradin Wall there. The Thoradin Wall was a huge fortification built by Thoradin the Great to resist the trolls. It was a combination of a huge fortress and a city wall. The stone used to build the fortress was the hardest granite, and it was solidified by the earth element. Heavy catapults could only leave a shallow dent on it at most. There, one man could hold the pass against 10,000 enemies. Duque smiled calmly. Go back. As a good friend and the commander of the Alliance, I agree to let you take all the Rangers back. Your homeland needs you more than the Alliance needs you. At this moment, the saint-level moral integrity that Medivh had inherited was shining. Did the Alliance not need the High Elves archers? Wrong. Torrentberg, which was about to be attacked by the Horde's Red Dragon cavalry, desperately needed the help of the Elven Rangers. Both Duque and Aurelia knew this. Duque had informed Kuel Salis in advance that the Horde would threaten them and let them go. Of course, Aurelia had volunteered to bring the elites of the Windrunner family to help. If they wanted to leave, the Alliance had no reason to stop them. It was to avoid putting Aurelia in a difficult position that Duque let her Rangers go. It was conceivable that once the Rangers left, Duque would be reprimanded by King Salas of Torrentberg. Aurelia's face burned. She was the one who volunteered to help. When the Horde needed her and her troops the most, she was the one who wanted to leave. If Duque had been more heartless and concealed the tribe's movements from the intelligence report, or had not told her the deduction of the direction of the war, and only found out at the last moment that she had been pulled into the main force, Aurelia, who had been squeezed dry for a long time, might have been able to be heartless. Now that Duque was so open and aboveboard, Aurelia felt that her guard was softening bit by bit. I. Aurelia said the word I 3 times in a row and didn't finish her sentence. The more carefree Duque's smile was, the more uncomfortable Aurelia felt. You should go back first. Use your and the Windrunner family's influence to see if you can wake up those arrogant old mages from their sweet dreams. Then, I'll save as many as I can, right? Aurelia shuddered. She had never thought that Duque would actually include the corruption in Silvermoon City. The thought of arguing with the pharaoh of the Silvermoon Council, who only knew how to hold them back, gave Aurelia a headache. At this moment, Servanas patted his sister's shoulder. "Sister, you should bring the main force back. I'll stay with the combat team that His Majesty the Sun King promised to the Alliance. I'll work hard for your share as well. Or, you don't trust my archery skills?" Looking at her smiling sister, Aurelia finally realized that this was the best choice. As a Ranger General, her influence in the country was much greater than her second sister's. As long as she brought the main force of the Windrunner family back, things would still be promising. Seeing the determination written on his sister's face, Servanas smiled. "Yes, I have to go back and tell the people who stayed behind." With that, he tapped the ground with the tip of his foot and disappeared, leaving behind an awkward Aurelia. Perhaps it was because she had seen Duque's appearance that Aurelia did not want to admit Duque's growth. That was why every time she saw Duque, she wanted to bully Duque like a strong elder. Unfortunately, even if she did not want to admit it, she had to admit it. Duque was no longer the little Duque she was familiar with. From his body to his intelligence to his way of dealing with people, it had only been less than a year, but Duque had completely grown up. He had become a great man who played an important role in various countries, and even the entire world of Azeroth. Lightly pursing her lips, Aurelia seemed to have made up her mind. The next second, Duque suddenly found a warm and plump female body behind him. Good brother, good brother, good brother. There was not the slightest pretense. Instead, when the orchid scent mixed with a touch of bashfulness blew into his ears, it made Duque's ears turn red. When Duque reacted, Kuel Salas's heroine, Aurelia, had already disappeared in the wind. Duque touched his ears and muttered to himself, "This time, there shouldn't be a tragedy, right?" Duque was a little lost. He had already changed too much of the history. In his previous life, Aurelia had lost her youngest brother, Riras, and her parents in the joint attack of the orcs and trolls. This made her hate the orcs to the point of permanent solidification. That was how the heroine of the Alliance Expeditionary Force, Aurelia, who crossed the dark portal and went on an expedition to the Draenor world. Duque did not know how history would be changed this time. Since Aurelia was so good to him and had an inexplicable relationship with him, Duque could not bear to see Aurelia's family die a tragedy. Sigh, let's see what Orgrim will do. Almost at the same time, Orgrim encountered a strange creature in the hinterlands. According to the scout's report, he thought that they had encountered ogres. Although these creatures were smaller in size, they displayed grace and quiet movements that he had never seen before on such a large creature. But when a ray of sunlight shone on one of the creatures that came forward, Orgrim discovered that the creature's skin was green, just like most of his subordinates and the color of the surrounding trees. This also explained why they did not notice these creatures before. The color of their skin allowed them to hide in the leaves, especially if they moved between branches like these creatures. He also saw that this creature was slightly taller than him, more capable than the ogres, and looked more balanced. This creature did not have overly long arms, large hands, or a large head. He stared at the creature in front of him. When he saw the glint in the creature's dark eyes, the creature suddenly thrust the spear in its hand at Orgrim. This showed that they were very intelligent. "We are not your enemies," Doomhammer roared. His roar tore apart the silence of the night. He knocked the spear away with one hand. Only then did he realize that the spearhead was made of stone and was abnormally sharp. "I want to see your leader." Chapter 328. Especially after Orgrim showed off his empty-handed blade grab, the trolls clearly recognized Orgrim's status as a powerful orc. After all, he was no newbie. With the same thrust, he had killed dozens of dwarves and humans. "What do you want from our leader?" I don't think our leader's meat is any better than ours, he he he. Orgrim spoke in the human language, and so did the trolls. Even though their tones were frighteningly strange, it did not stop them from communicating. Especially after noticing that they had a common interest in spoils of war, human skulls, the hostility between them decreased significantly. We are orcs from the Blackrock tribe of the Horde. Trolls, forest trolls, a Mani tribe. The troll was surprised that the orcs did not know about the trolls. Alright, tell me, why do you want to see our leader? I want to talk to him, for our common enemy. Orgrim emphasized the second half of the sentence. The Horde's disadvantage at sea had cost them dearly. Orgrim was not a simple-minded person like Blackhand. He had already begun to realize that humans, dwarves, and elves would all bring more trouble to the orcs. If the orcs wanted to conquer this world, they would have to defeat the allied forces of the three powerful races. This was definitely not an easy task for the orcs, who were already greatly weakened. Since the Horde had already accepted the ogres and the human death knights, why couldn't they accept the trolls? What's more, their almost identical green skin allowed them to have something in common. However, diplomacy did not rely on talking. All diplomacy was based on force. Even though Orgrim had already restrained himself and kept his war hammer a meter away from his hand to show that he had no ill intentions, the other troll obviously had a different thought process than the first one. We never negotiate with our meal. Meal? These guys actually see us orcs as a meal? Orgrim let out a cold laugh. That guy made his move. A powerful spear throw. The spear seemed to break through the atmosphere, and it was swift and violent in a way that most orcs did not expect. Simple and direct. The only thing special about it was its speed. It was unbelievably fast, so fast that it was insane. A moment ago, the javelin was just a small black dot in his field of vision. The next moment, it occupied Orgrim's entire field of vision. If this continued, the spear would be like a watermelon piercing through the head of the Horde's great chief. Of course, the prerequisite was that Orgrim, who was known as the Hammer of Destruction, stood there like an idiot. Without even dodging, Orgrim grabbed his war hammer. Hammer of Destruction, which looked like a heavy weapon, was as light as a dagger in front of Orgrim's powerful arm strength. In the blink of an eye, the huge square-headed black warhammer had already whipped up a gust of wind as it swung like a baseball bat hitting a baseball. It was a perfect grand slam home run. Orgrim actually managed to deflect the troll's spear, and the broken shaft of the spear pierced right through the troll's knee. That guy let out a miserable howl and tightly hugged his pierced leg. Ha! Orgrim let out a loud battle cry. The deafening roar caused the surrounding leaves to howl with Orgrim at the center. The other trolls were shocked by Orgrim's roar, and they stopped their attacks that were supposed to save their comrade. Of course, Orgrim would not give the guy who dared to offend the great chief of the Horde a chance to beg for mercy. He needed to establish his dominance. This guy who dared to run into his hammer must die. With an earth-shattering leap/slash, Orgrim leaped forward and crossed a distance of 5 meters. Like a god descending from the heavens, he appeared in front of the fallen troll. Hammer of Destruction carried Orgrim's anger at being provoked, and with an unparalleled might, it smashed towards the troll's head. Puff! For the first time, the troll's skull turned into a watermelon. This was not the end. In the next moment, from the collarbone, shoulder blade, pelvic bone, leg bone, all the bones and flesh within the range of the Hammer of Destruction were smashed into pieces, and blood and flesh splattered everywhere. A troll that was more than 3 meters tall was instantly turned into a pile of minced meat that even his mother wouldn't be able to recognize. I'll say it again. I want to see your leader. The words were a request, and the tone was a command. As Orgrim roared, he turned around and unleashed his most powerful pressure on the other trolls. These trolls were still in a daze from this bloody and brutal counterattack. They were trembling in fear. Bring me to him, or I'll kill everyone who refuses to do so. Then, I'll go find the trolls who are willing to bring me there myself." Hammer of Destruction was raised high in the air. With the cheers of the orcs as the background, the blood dripping from the black stone hammer, the faded fur, and the broken bones and flesh, the remaining trolls lost the courage to challenge Orgrim. Orgrim's domineering aura was effective. All the trolls took a step back, put their spears on their backs, and spread their hands to show that they were not hostile. Then, a troll with a necklace of bones walked out from the middle of them. "You want to talk to Zhu Jin? If Zhu Jin is your leader's name or title, then yes." Orgrim nodded. "You will see him. We will wait here." Hammer of Destruction calmly announced to the troll and his subordinates. An hour later, without any warning, a shadow emerged from the forest with huge and quiet steps, bringing with it the troll and 3 other powerful trolls who looked extremely capable. "If you want to see Zhu Jin, then I am." Zhu Jin was much taller and more capable than the other trolls. He was wearing a leather vest that was unbuttoned. A thick scarf was wrapped around his neck, covering the area below his nose. The parts that were exposed gave a ferocious impression. Because he was close enough, Orgrim noticed that the troll's skin was covered in moss. "What a strange race. You want our forest? Or do you want to fight us for those despicable humans and elves? If you're here to issue a challenge, then I've received it." Zhu Jin's hand went to his waist. There were 2 axes hanging there. "No, it's the opposite. We have a common enemy." Orgrim grinned. His swaying fangs made Zhu Jin uncomfortable. Chapter 329. Duque did not try to stop the trolls from joining the tribe. That would be a waste of effort. Trolls joining the tribe was almost inevitable. 14,000 years ago in Azeroth, the trolls, the native race of Azeroth, had established many large kingdoms. Amani and Gurubashi were the largest, and these 2 kingdoms were ruled by the Zendala tribe. Thus, they were praised as the Great Zendala Empire. 7,000 years ago, Dasrima Sunstrider brought along the elven nobles who wanted to continue researching and using arcane magic. They left their fellow night elves who followed the teachings of the druids and accepted exile and migrated to the northern continent of the Eastern Kingdom, commonly known as the Lordaeron continent. These high elves who moved east evolved into high elves and established their own magic kingdom, Kuel Salis. As a new nation of immigrants, Kuel Salis and the local troll Amani Empire began a war over the issue of land expansion that lasted thousands of years. Until 2,800 years ago, when humans began to rise, Thoradin the Great united the human tribes and established the Arathar Empire. The High Elves' kingdom of Kuel Salis was no match for the troll Amani Empire. In desperation, they sought help from humans and began to teach them the power of arcane magic. Arathar and the kingdom of Kuel Salis worked together to defeat the troll Amani Empire. The trolls were unable to recover from this setback, and the troll war came to an end. It could be said that the trolls had a feud with humans and elves that had been passed down for thousands of years. Their blood and souls had been poured on this continent in the fierce battle. The hatred had long been so strong that it could not be dissolved. Furthermore, there were too many troll clans. Even if Duque had dealt with the Amani clan in advance, there were still many other clans on this continent. For example, the Zendala tribe in Stranglethorn Vale was the ancestors of all trolls. They were also known as primitive trolls. Trolls were generally divided into 5 main groups. Other than primitive trolls, there were also jungle trolls, forest trolls, desert trolls, and ice trolls. There were many branches of different sizes according to their attributes. Sand Fury, Ice Hare, Evil Branch, Blood Scalp, Skull Splitter and other small branches were ignored. There were 7 or 8 large Amani-level clans. Rather than letting Orgrim form an alliance with the trolls, it would be better to leave it to the Amani. At least Duque would be able to predict their route of advance. Of course, before dealing with Orgrim's elite army and trolls, Duque still had something important to do. Cover the retreat of Stromgard's troops to Torrentberg and Saladin's wall. The most frightening thing about a retreat was being routed. Once the rearguard troops were destroyed, one could imagine the following scenario: the torrent of green that represented the Horde orcs and the silver that represented the Stormguard kingdom crossed over the entire Arthi Highlands. The bitter silver was chased by the green from all directions. The human army, which was severely lacking in transportation, was torn apart by the orcs who charged from all directions in the battle on the plains. After fighting for so long, the Alliance and the Horde were really angry. It was conceivable that if the retreat failed, not many people would be spared. The orcs who had better endurance would chase down every human who tried to escape and kill them in the cruelest way possible. There were no captives, no mercy. Only 1 in 100 soldiers would be able to return to Torrentberg alive. The Arthi Highlands where Torrentberg was located were not fertile. The mountainous nature of the highlands limited the production of food and the upper limit of the total population. Among the 7 human kingdoms, the population of the Stormguard kingdom was only slightly higher than that of the pure mountainous Alterac kingdom. In a sense, Stormguard was even weaker than Stormwind, which had lost its territory. At the very least, the fertile elven forest fed hundreds of thousands of Stormwind citizens. The total population of Stormguard was less than 250,000. To be able to gather an army of 30,000 was already the limit of what the people of Torrentberg could do. Salas Trollbane could not imagine that if he lost all the 50,000 people at the Sodder Bridge, including the civilian workers, would there be a tomorrow for Torrentberg? However, the most capable troops of the Alliance were basically fighting the main orc force of Grom Helhal's Warsong clan at the Western Front. The greatest support the Stormguard people received was half of the Scarlet Cross Legion led by Abendis. Abendis's men went to the Wall of Soradin to replace the people of Torrentberg so that Salas had more troops to defend Torrentberg. Other than that, there was Duque's mages and Aurelia's rangers. When he heard that Aurelia was worried about something happening in the country and left with her men, if it was not for the fact that Duque and Aurelia had a close relationship, Salas would have scolded her in public. "Don't be agitated, General Trollbane. I let Aurelia go back because I have enough confidence that I can successfully protect 90% of the Stormguard soldiers to return to Torrentberg safely." Salas was stunned for a full 5 seconds before he came to his senses. This ridiculously young deputy commander of the Alliance standing in front of him had a much more impressive battle record than the actual commander of the Alliance, Noxus. Perhaps Duque had not proven himself in offensive battles, but when it came to defense, interception, and evacuation under extremely disadvantageous circumstances, Duque was definitely an expert among experts. It seems like you can't burn down the entire defense line in the Straits?" King Salas asked a very amusing question. "Pfft!" Duque burst out laughing. "Sorry, I didn't mean to offend you." "Offend? The Arthi people don't care about etiquette. As long as you can protect these people, I can even let my son be your attendant." Salas sold his son without any shame. Duque still had a lot of respect for the Arthi people who had the Torrentberg as their core. In the history, the Torrentberg had withstood the undead calamity head-on. Even when there were only 3,000 people left in the kingdom, none of them gave up. They fought bravely in various areas of the Arthi Highlands, declaring their resistance and unyieldingness to the tribes and all invaders. No, I am not shameless enough to make a prince my attendant." If he really did this, it would undoubtedly make Duque feel that he was full of arrogance. "In fact, I have always advocated the minimum sacrifice in exchange for the greatest results." "Very well, Deputy Commander Marcus, what do you plan to do?" Salas paused for a moment, but still felt that he had to give Duque a little benefit. "If you succeed, you will undoubtedly become a hero in the hearts of the people of Torrentberg." I think there will be no less than 100 knight candidates in Torrentburg who admire your prestige and volunteer to become your followers. 100 quasi-knights did not sound like a lot. But considering that there were 100 of them who were very good at fighting and could help him manage his fief, the weight was much greater. Chapter 330. Duque had also doubted the loyalty of the people from Torrential Fortress. Knights who could fight were still useful. If they were loyal to someone else's king, it would be a pain in the ass. In fact, after inspecting the goods, Duque realized that he had been thinking too much. This was a world with a feudal aristocratic system. Even if the customs of the Seven Kingdoms were different, they were still the same, the descendants of the Arathor Empire, the people of Thoradin the Great. The nobles who were loyal to other human kingdoms did not have as many problems as one might imagine. In this era, only the eldest son could inherit the land. The second, third, fourth, and daughter could only be filled in according to the order below. Generally speaking, the second and third sons might have some hope. They could pray for something to happen to their eldest brother, but there was no hope for the rest. Just like in Stormwind's elven forest, 1,000 years of inheritance had already given up all the land in the Arthi Highlands. If they wanted new land, they could only reach out to the outside or the royal family. To the south of the Arthi Highlands was the territory of the Bronzebeard dwarves. To the east was the sea. To the west was Alterax's territory behind the Thoradin Wall. To the north was the hinterlands near the Arthi Highlands. It was still the dwarves, but they were the Wildhammer dwarves. Hence, the Stormguard kingdom was completely unable to expand. As the saying went, barren hills and wild rivers produced tough people. The Arthi soldiers had outstanding combat power. Apart from equipment, the Arthi people's land combat power was definitely one of the best in the Seven Kingdoms. Of course, because they were poor and had poor equipment, their overall combat power was not as good as the people of Rotterdam. With 100 knight candidates, Duque had made a profit. Anyway, Duque did not intend to let the people from Torrential Fortress suffer a loss. The knight candidates had a good impression of Duque. First of all, Duque's reputation was illustrious, the Alliance's vice-commander, the slayer of nearly 300,000 orcs, an archmage with a limitless future, the inventor of a new weapon, and the biggest financial backer of the Stormwind Kingdom. There was nothing more promising than having a boss who could fight, make money, and help his underlings get benefits. If the Alliance could not defeat the Horde in this race war, then it would be the end of the human race. If the Alliance won, it would be natural for them to exterminate the beast men. Once Stormwind was restored, Duque's status would be exaggerated. He would be a true Grand Duke, a Grand Lord. The eastern part of the fertile Elven Forest, a small piece of the Night Forest, a large piece of the Red Ridge Mountain, and the Upwind Trail area. Looking at the situation, Duque's fief might not be limited to just this. This was a better piece of land than the whole of the Arthi Highlands. These knight candidates were so excited that they were about to go crazy. They couldn't wait to become Duque's followers and wear the battle robe of the Marcus family. Of course, this was on the premise that Duque had to successfully evacuate the 50,000 Storm Guardians to Torrentburg. 20,000 elite soldiers, 10,000 auxiliary soldiers, and 20,000 craftsmen and militia. If Duque was just an inexperienced brat, or if he had a better idea, King Salas Trollbane would not let Duque make the arrangements. But he was Duque, the Alliance's hero, Duke Marcus. The weight of this name alone was enough to make Salas trust Duque more than himself. When Salas asked, "What are you going to do?" and Duque took out a thick stack of action guides, Salas was stunned for a full 3 seconds. Without waiting for Duque to explain in detail, Salas snapped his fingers. "In the name of the King of Stormguard and the General of the Alliance Army, I command you. During the retreat, all of you must listen to the orders of the Deputy Commander, Sir Marcus. Those who disobey will be punished by my sword." With that, Salas unsheathed his sword and handed it to Duque in a solemn manner. Duque was dumbfounded. King Salas smiled faintly. Sorry, I am the kind of person who can't help but rush into battle when I see it. Besides, the Trollbane family will only fight to the last moment, victory or death. If I stay here, I will only interfere with your command and become a burden to you. I only hope that you will not betray the trust of me and the people of Torrentberg. At least 50,000 ladies are waiting for the return of their man. Duque's expression turned serious. Don't worry, since I can lead 50,000 besieged Stormwind elite soldiers across the sea, I can also lead 50,000 people of Torrentberg back to their homes and become the last line of defense for Torrentberg. That night, the tribe's beastmen in charge of reclamation discovered the changes on the other side. Compared to the day, the beastmen preferred to reclaim the sea at night, because the accuracy of the ballistae and catapults on the other side would be greatly reduced. Often, one night's work could be equivalent to 4 days' work. But today was different. Almost as soon as the beastmen reclamation team reached the middle of the strait, a large string of flashing flares rose from the other side of the strait, illuminating the area within a diameter of more than 100 meters as if it was daytime. The next moment, accompanied by the fierce beating of war drums, the sound of countless bowstrings sounded from the other side. Large ballistae, small arrows, and pebbles were all rained down on the vital parts of the beastmen who ran over to reclaim the sea with rocks on their backs. Not only did the attacks look dense, but they were also very effective. Of the more than 200 beastmen laborers who went up, none were spared. They all died there, and not a single one returned. 5 minutes later, the beastmen in the middle of the strait suffered the same devastating blow. Another 5 minutes later, the same thing happened downstream. The commander of the beastmen was shocked. What the hell was this? He had no choice but to call for the Dragonmaw beastmen's dragon riders, but it seemed that the terrifying elven ranger was still there. With the support of the high elves' night vision, the sharp arrows of death still pierced through the beastmen's throats. That night, there were 5 crossings, and the beastmen lost the lives of 2,000 laborers, but their progress was completely stagnant. When he received the report, Red Blackhand, the son of the former chief, didn't care. Let Zuluhid continue to send out his precious red lizards. Keep attacking during the day, and I'll see how long the humans can last. The beastmen didn't have the gift of night vision, and because the red dragons didn't cooperate, the beastmen dragon riders were more effective during the day. The attack on Solder Bridge continued, and the humans seemed to have concentrated their forces on the bridge. The defenses there were still impenetrable. But elsewhere, the dragon riders had successfully destroyed more than 100 unguarded ballistae and catapults. Chapter 331. This is progress. It proves that the humans are beginning to weaken. Rend laughed. At the beginning of the attack, the humans could still use the high mobility of the mage's teleportation and the sniping of the 2 half-elves to prevent the beastmen from gaining any advantage. Of course, Half was referring to Lilith Windrunner. Even though Illyria held her sister in high esteem, there was always a difference between an advertisement and reality, wasn't there? Lilith's archery was also very good. Her talent was also top-notch among the rangers. But she lacked the competitive heart of a strong warrior, which happened to be the most important thing for her to truly step into the realm of heroes. Now, even if the beastmen still had to pay a high price, the beastmen could still rely on their strong capital to deplete the strength of the alliance. The following days seemed to be a tug of war. The humans only guarded the bridge, and at night, relied on long-range attacks to snipe the beastmen's reclamation. Taking advantage of the arrival of the night, the craftsmen frantically built and repaired the catapults and ballistae. During the day, there were still so many human soldiers patrolling the defense line of Solder Bridge that the beastmen scouts were dazzled. There seemed to be nothing wrong. But the Storm Guardians who were still at Solder Bridge were moved to tears. Why? The main force had all withdrawn. Apart from the 5,000 elite soldiers and 3,000 craftsmen who were guarding the bridge, the rest had been orderly evacuated at a rate of about 5,000 people per night in the past week. Without lighting torches, they only relied on the white cloth wrapped around each other's shoulders and walked back along the road under the guidance of the best scouts. The range of the Dragon Maw orcs was limited. As long as they were more than 20 kilometers away from the northern position of Solder Bridge, even ghosts would not know. During the days of retreat, what Sylvanas did the most was not to kill the enemy near the cliff, but to kill the enemy scouts who went too deep into the defense line and rode on the flying dragons. The remaining small team of elven rangers each had a few human scouts and a mage under Duque. Once they discovered the invasion of the tribe's flying dragons, Duque would immediately teleport with Queen Sylvie to the preset teleportation circle and kill the tribe's scouts. The scouts near the cliff line did not pay any attention. Every night, there was only one person in charge of sniping the tribe, Duque. After becoming a Morning Star wizard, Duque could control 512 Magus hands at the same time. Being able to do it did not mean that it could be done in the long run. For example, a grown man could lift something that weighed 100 kilograms for a while, but if he wanted to lift it for an hour, it would really be impossible. Only 1 in 10,000 could do it. Sylvanas, who had been following Duque for the past 3 days, quietly watched as Duque made all sorts of incredible efforts to save the lives of the 50,000 Torrential Castle soldiers. Duque was clearly a mortal, but he demanded of him as a Superman. As a noble mage with a limitless future, not only did he personally fight on the front lines, he did not hesitate to lower his status and do the lowly work of controlling the ballistae with the hand of magic. From west to east, there were a total of 12 ballista positions, each with more than 30 ballistas, 12 catapults, and 500 ballistas that were basically fixed, loaded, and aimed at the coast. There was only one person controlling them, Duke Marcus. With the help of the system elf, he shot a perfect kill in every wave, not letting a single laborer escape. Almost as soon as he finished attacking one position, Duque would immediately teleport to the next. After he left, the logistics team of less than 30 people quickly came out and reloaded every ballista, catapult, and ballista. It was no exaggeration to say that, depending on the situation of the tribe's attack, Duque would teleport back and forth between the 12 positions 30 to 40 times in a night. For the current Duke, just the huge consumption of stamina and spiritual force was enough to squeeze 10 ordinary Morning Star wizards dry, not to mention being a wizard. Duque was still persevering. The people of Torrential Castle sighed at Duque's strength, and on the other hand, they were moved to tears by Duque's greatness. Sometimes in the command post, Duque would be so tired that he would fall asleep while talking. No one blamed Duque. Duque had done enough. If not for Duque, perhaps most of them would not have made it back to Torrential Castle alive. On the 8th day, the most crucial moment had arrived. According to the plan, all the troops would be withdrawn tonight, leaving only Duque and Sylvanas to bring up the rear. This was simply inconceivable. If not for Duque's various miracles over the past few days, everyone would have completely opposed Duque. Sir, you've done enough, that's good enough. If you want to sacrifice yourself in exchange for the survival of the people of Torrential Castle, then please forgive us for not being able to follow your orders. Brigadier General Atruz, who was the last to stay behind, shouted excitedly, raising his voice by a few notches, "Next, it's time for the people of Torrential Castle to bleed." Not only Atruz, but a dozen or so Stormguard generals also stepped forward and formed a wall of will and flesh, blocking in front of Duque. Summon His Majesty Salas Trollbane's order. Even if we have to kidnap, we must bring His Excellency Duke Marcus back to Torrential Castle ahead of time. It seems that a great hero like Duque should not die in such a pointless way. Compared to Torrential Castle, the Alliance needs Duke Marcus more. What are you doing? I know you mean well, but are you going to rebel? At the same time, Sylvanas, who had drawn his twin swords, and Gavin Rad, who had taken out his warhammer, stood in front of Duque, one on the left and one on the right. Although they knew that most people would not fight, they had to have an attitude. Brigadier General Autruz did not expect Duque's men to react so fiercely, and his momentum was stifled for a moment. Duque looked at Autruz calmly. If there were no exceptions, this man would become a marshal in the future. Duque sighed, and then his eyes gradually became full of power. Enough. I appreciate King Trollbane's good intentions. But remember, I am Duque. Duke Marcus. The wizard who would bite off a piece of flesh from the enemy even if he was defeated and had to retreat. When I retreated last time, I burned 100,000 orcs to death. This time, I have to retreat. How can I be satisfied if I don't kill 100,000 orcs? When Duque said this, Autruz actually asked, then where are we going to get the kerosene? Duque froze, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. Bastard, who said I'm going to start a fire again? Ugh, God of Fire. Duque isn't going to start a fire? Damn it, when did I become a god of fire? Duque was so angry at Autruz that he laughed until tears came out of his eyes. Get lost. Who said I only know how to start a fire? Let me tell you, the one standing in front of you today is Ghost Schemer Duque. Chapter 332. Ghost Schemer Duque? Who would give themselves a nickname these days? Why did the Alliance have the name, Fire God Duque? It was because Duque was good at using fire. He burned half of the Elven Forest, burned Stormwind City, and used the FFF flamethrowers to burn down the Horde's main force in Silverpine Forest. Most of Duque's famous battles were related to fire. Giving him the nickname, Fire God, was not a bad idea. Unfortunately, Duque was not happy about it. How could a mere god of fire compare to the leader of the four major elements? What heaven-defying god of magic? That's right. I should at least be an archmage. Anyway, Duque did not want to be a fire god. Duque knew very well that the retreat was half a success. If he could do this, he would probably be given the title of strategist. That was not enough. Orgrim must have landed in the hinterlands. For some reason, there was no news from there, but Duque had to settle things here as soon as possible and mobilize troops to deal with Orgrim. If the battle at Riptide Stronghold was very tight, Duque as the Alliance's deputy commander could not leave, nor could he mobilize troops in advance. So, if Duque wanted to reduce the pressure on Riptide Stronghold, the best way was to make the Horde suffer again. The Horde's troops did not seem to be decreasing. Only Duque and the commanders of Stormwind City, who had been fighting with the Horde for the longest, felt it the most. The Horde had begun to decline. For example, the Horde's combat power was 100 before, but now it was at most 70. As the losses increased, the Horde's combat power would reach a critical point. Once it broke through this critical point, the quantitative change would become a qualitative change. When that time came, the Alliance would switch from defense to offense. Seeing that General Autrius and the others wanted to say something, Duque gently pushed Servanas and Gavin Rat away and waved his hand at them. Gentlemen, thank you for your willingness to sacrifice for me. I appreciate your kindness. In the future, if I can't survive, I will come to you. On the contrary, if you can't survive in the future, you can look for me. As long as I defeat the orcs, I'll be a great lord. Duque shrugged and said, but before that, can I trouble you to get out of here according to the plan? Unless you have my magic power, knowledge, and stratagem, your poor imagination will never know what I want to do. Duque's words were no longer at the level of, you're welcome. If Duque had said this before, even if the king was above their heads, they would still find trouble with Duque. But men were such simple creatures. Once they had gone through life and death together, they were brothers. Not a single Storm Guardian took Duque's words as an insult or provocation. On the contrary, after seeing their compatriots who had a high chance of dying successfully retreat to Torrentberg, they saw Duque shining with divine light from head to toe. Alterace gritted his teeth. Promise me, you won't die here. I don't need to promise you that, because I still have to settle things here and find trouble with Orgrim. That green-painted bastard is still occupying my territory. Duque said wittily, but the confidence in his eyes still won over the people of Torrentberg. Nearly 20 generals of all sizes saluted Duque at the same time. After taking care of those valiant generals, Duke ordered Wuxia. All right, there are still 2 hours before the orcs attack. I'm going to sleep for a while. Duque was too tired, even though his room in the encampment was terrible, with no spring mattress or soft pillows. Duque slept like a dead pig the moment he laid down. In his days, he felt that he was lying on a very soft and smooth pillow. Duque moved his neck to make himself more comfortable. This is good, better than the space memory pillow. Duque did not know how long he slept, but the system elf's warning woke him up. Dear host, I'm sorry to disturb you, but I'm afraid you'll have to wake up from the blissful time of sleeping on your lap. Because the orcs are coming. Duque woke up in a daze, and he suddenly realized a word, lap pillow. The next moment, Duke opened his eyes and was almost blinded by what he saw. What did he see? His dog head was resting on 2 slender, round, but not sensual legs. Seeing the long mage dress wrapped around the legs, Duque immediately realized whose legs they were. Not only that, Duque, who was in a hurry to turn his head, bumped into something. It was a soft object that was less than 2 centimeters above his head. Something's wrong. Duque's body instantly stiffened. Woo! I'm a salted fish. I'm a motionless salted fish, I didn't do anything just now. The pure and innocent little virgin Duque hypnotized himself like a retard. At this time, Miss Berev also woke up. She rubbed her eyes, only to find that Duque was awake. Sorry, teacher. Duque, I didn't mean to offend you, I just saw that you were sleeping very hard. You were muttering the pillow is too hard or something, and when I came over, you. Duque was completely disheartened. I slept on your lap. Wuxia blushed, but finally nodded. Why didn't you resist? Duque said almost as if he was possessed. I was confused by what you said about the space pillow. Wuxia tried to change the topic. In fact, Duque's actions were even more crude, and the young lady of the Berev family was almost scared to death, but she did not dare to resist. A mage's body was fragile, and if she accidentally hurt Duque and caused the Alliance's plan to fail, she would be guilty. And surprisingly, she did not seem to resist this kind of thing that should only be done between lovers. At this time, something that made Duque feel even more like a nightmare had happened. Suddenly, a soft cough came from outside the window. Even if Duque turned into ashes, he would still recognize that it was the voice of Queen Sylvanas. Ahem, I was worried that the Lord Deputy Commander was too tired, so I came to remind you to prepare for the tribe's night attack. It seems that the Lord Deputy Commander has something more important to do. No, actually Duque rushed out as fast as he could. Who knew that as soon as he stepped out of the door, Queen Sylvanas accidentally stepped on his foot. I'm sorry, I was really careless just now. Sister clearly repeatedly told me to take care of you. Sylvanas put his hands on his waist and slowly retracted his foot. At this moment, Duque finally understood the difference between being rude and being spoiled for a woman. If a girl stepped on your foot and scolded you, that was called being rude. If a beautiful goddess stepped on you, scolded you, and her breasts trembled when she scolded you, that would be called acting coquettishly. Well, for Queen Sylvanas, although Duque did not have any improper thoughts, he just could not get angry. Chapter 333. Duque was a pure person. Other than what he had learned from those 10 terabytes of romantic action movies, he was as pure as a saint. Well, in theory. Come to think of it, if he longed for any kind of tender love from the Windrunner, he would have to eat a moronic pill to be able to do so. A mixture of wildness and nobility was the biggest trademark of the Windrunner family. If he liked someone, he liked them. If he hated them, he hated them. There was no need to hide it. The women of the Windrunner family were so straightforward and pure. However, after a little anger, Sylvanas suddenly realized that he actually had no reason to be angry. He felt that his elder sister and Duque did have that kind of taste. At the end of the day, it seemed that she and Duque weren't even lovers. Moreover, one look and he knew that Duque didn't do it on purpose. Moreover, Duque was really exhausted during this period of time. Silvermoon City didn't lack mages, and they were also the most pampered ones. Well, today's weather isn't good, so it's not suitable for anything. I, the Pharaoh, am not serving. I'm going on strike. The cat next door was in heat last night, so I didn't sleep well. I won't do anything today. Tomorrow seems to be cloudy. I'm not in a good mood, so I won't do anything tomorrow. Endless years of emptiness had created the unique arrogance of the Silvermoon Council. If a young and promising mage like Duque was placed in the High Elves, wouldn't he be arrogant to the point of death? But for the sake of the Alliance, for the safety of more people, Duque still did it without any hesitation. In a situation where he didn't receive any support. From Sylvanas' point of view, Duque was doing 10 jobs by himself, using his strength and hard work to fill in the gap left by the departure of Aurelia and the Rangers. In this regard, Duque did it flawlessly. They were clearly more than friends, but not lovers. Why could his elder sister and Duque trust and tolerate each other so much? His elder sister was willing to go to jail for 3 months for Duque without any regrets. In order to not let his elder sister lose her trust, Duque single-handedly carried the entire line of defense. Sylvanas, who was biting her lower lip, suddenly felt a little envious of the vague yet sincere relationship between her elder sister and Duque. Looking at Duque's bitter face, Sylvanas found that he couldn't get angry. Does it hurt? Fortunately, at least it wasn't an axe from the tribe. Duque smiled bitterly. Sylvanas raised her long golden eyebrows. I won't apologize. But I will protect you with my life until you leave safely. Duque curled his lips. Queen Sylvanas is really an awkward person. Tonight, as always, Duque used the time difference to defend. Of course, tonight was a little different. The Horde felt that it wasn't good for there to be no progress after so many nights. Tonight, the Horde sent out a few companies of orcs to test the waters. These orc warriors from small clans were basically cannon fodder, so Red Blackhand didn't care about them. A report woke Red up. What? Some soldiers reported that there was no one in the enemy's position at all. It was just a group of mages using Hand of Magic to control the ballistae? Red immediately realized his mistake. The humans had long been unable to hold on, but in order to let more people evacuate, they adopted the strategy of using elites to cover the rear. Immediately send the Black Fury, Wind Raven, and Red Feather clans to attack overnight. Red casually yelled out a few names of small clans that he almost couldn't remember himself. A total of only 5,000 people launched an attack to test the waters. Although an hour later, there were reports of heavy casualties among the attacking troops, but more accurate reports came in, there were no soldiers in all the human sniping positions. It was estimated that one or a few mages were using Hand of Magic to control the ballistae and various kinds of crossbows back and forth at high speed. The current Red Blackhand was far from the boss-level guy in the future. At least he was a qualified commander. He immediately realized the intention of the humans. Since this natural stronghold couldn't be defended, then more troops should be withdrawn back to Torrential Fortress and layers of defense. The more soldiers the humans withdrew now, the harder it would be to attack Torrential Fortress, the capital of the humans in the Arthi Highlands. Mobilize the entire army. When the sun rises, we will attack. In the urgent sound of the bugle, the tribes began to assemble. The army from the various military camps in the rear areas of the wetlands converged on the south bank of Sadr Bridge. Nearly 100,000 orc laborers were spurred to pile up a large number of large stones used to fill the sea, ready to fill up the last stretch of the channel at dawn for the army to pass through. Cold light flashed in the darkness, and the long fangs of the orcs glowed with a bloodthirsty dark light under the moonlight. In the anxious waiting, the sun finally rose. Red waved his hand, and the bugler blew a heavy horn. Woo woo woo, it urged the orcs to bite the last of the human troops to cover the rear. As Rend had expected, almost all the positions were empty. There were no skilled craftsmen left, and the last group of craftsmen had already evacuated last night. At least 10 hours. They left behind everything that would slow them down. The scout's report made Red Blackhand's face darken. A group of strong craftsmen, prepared to evacuate in the dark without any burden, even if they were slow, 10 hours would be enough for them to travel 50 kilometers. Maybe in 3 hours, they could reach Riptide Castle, 100 kilometers away. Let the Wolf Riders cross Sadr Bridge at full speed, chase. Catch up as much as you can. The Wolf Riders riding huge war wolves waved their huge machetes and galloped across the bridge, accompanied by the roars of the war wolves. Even though most of the war wolves' huge and sharp claws were retracted into the pads of their feet, the claws that were still exposed scraped the hard bridge surface, making a harsh sound. Thousands of wolf riders were about to pass through the position at the north end of the bridge. At this moment, on the position that had clearly been investigated by the scouts and was already empty, all the ballistae and preloaded arrows suddenly moved. Manipulating them was, naturally, the hands of magic that emitted a soft arcane glow. Ambush! The leading wolf rider captain let out a shuddering roar. It was too late. In the next second, the entire sky was filled with the harsh sound of sharp arrows breaking through the wind. Who would have thought that there would be an ambush on this position that had been investigated by the scouts? The Wolf Riders were a pure offensive unit, with strong attack power, speed, and endurance, but the armor of the Wolf Riders was still only at the light cavalry level. Encountering this kind of deliberate ambush, no less than 3,000 Wolf Riders were immediately annihilated. Countless arrows pierced through the weak leather armor of the Wolf Riders and shot into the bodies of the Wolf Riders and war wolves, but there was nowhere to hide in the narrow passage in the middle of the position and on the bridge. Those arrows, as if they had eyes, accurately shot into their vitals. Chapter 334. If he could kill it with one arrow, he would never use a second arrow. Rend Blackhand's heart was bleeding. Compared to the red dragons that were forced to go to the battlefield and didn't know how long they could last, the Wolf Riders were the core troops of the tribe. War wolves had been fighting with the orcs for at least tens of thousands of years. They were the most capable companions, hunting helpers, and the strongest warriors of the orcs. In the past battles with humans, as long as there was a state of melee, the Wolf Riders formed by orcs and wargs could often fight human cavalry with a high exchange ratio of more than 1:5, or even 1:10. The Wolf Riders were definitely the pride of the tribe. Unfortunately, wargs were not so easy to feed. A strong adult warg could weigh more than a ton and be a little more than 3 meters tall. Even a wolf's back was 2 meters off the ground. In contrast, the appetite of a warg was astonishing. A warg could feed at least 4 adult orc warriors of 10 powerful clans. Only the most powerful clans that controlled the fattest hunting areas could afford to raise wargs. Only the heavy cavalry from Lordaeron could compete with them. They rode super-giant horses called Light of Lordaeron that could pull 3 tons of cargo. These giant horses also weighed more than a ton, and looked like a cross between a horse and an elephant. Their footsteps were heavy, and their hooves sounded like thunder. Although they couldn't sprint for long, they were so powerful in a short sprint that they could knock wargs away. In any case, the wargs were the treasures of the tribe. If it wasn't for the pursuit, how could Ren be willing to send the wolf riders? Well, now they thought they were passing through an abandoned position. Who would have thought that they were charging towards the enemy's position? Almost at the same time, Ren wanted to order the wolf riders to come back. Too late. The solder bridge was not narrow, but that was from the perspective of transportation. If it was a battlefield, the solder bridge would definitely be a narrow path. The wolf riders in the back already felt that something was wrong and wanted to turn back. Unfortunately, it was not that easy. The next moment, after shooting all the preset arrows, Duque's hands of magic floated into the air. 256 hands of magic blasted out the most powerful, Frostfire arrow. Some of the clans in the horde had strange resistances. For example, the Blackrock clan generally had fire resistance, while the Frostwolf clan had ice resistance. Too lazy to identify them one by one, Duque directly used the Frostfire arrow that could be used by all classes. No matter how high your resistances are, you're just a Mount Wolf. You can't be like a warlock or a mage with all types of resistances, right? The Frostfire arrow, which was a mixture of white frost, red flame, and arcane purple, was the most terrifying reaper, madly reaping the lives of the wolf riders on the narrow bridge. Or there was a huge explosion that splattered hot flesh and blood. Or perhaps the ice that froze everything froze all life. Or perhaps the brilliance of the arcane spell had disintegrated organic matter. No wolf rider could escape unscathed after being hit. Almost at the same time, a strange buzzing sound came from the north bridgehead. The arrow rang, but the bowstring did not ring. This strange technique could only mean that one person had come, Ranger General Sylvanas. With her jade-white skin and slender body, the female elf maintained her high-speed movement under the cover of the walls and trenches. She didn't need to maintain an optimal shooting range at all. Any place with good cover would be enough for her to shoot a deadly arrow of death. Unlike her sister's traditional way of thinking, Sylvanas's tactics were more practical. After the rapid increase in arrow consumption, she no longer stuck to using the light wooden arrows unique to elven rangers, which were made of wood from the arrowhead to the shaft. Instead, she casually used the iron arrowhead arrows commonly used by earthy Highland archers. Their armor-piercing ability was better, but they did not have the almost silent concealment of the elven rangers' wooden arrows. Very simply, in order to increase the deterrence, Sylvanas simply asked the craftsman of Riptide Castle to make a batch of simple whistles for her and attached them to the arrowheads. Once shot, they would make a strange buzzing sound. This kind of small whistle would, of course, affect the accuracy, but for Queen Sylvanas' archery, as long as the target was not more than 100 meters away, the impact would not be big. Anyway, it was used to clean up small fries. Protect the vitals. The wolf riders screamed as soon as they heard the unique sound of the arrow. They immediately used their machetes to protect their throats as much as possible. After days of fighting, they had long understood that the elven ranger opposite them was their nightmare. A dark gray light flashed, and the arrow actually directly pierced through the broad-bladed machete in the hands of a wolf rider, passing through the unlucky fellow's neck. Then, with a violent spray of blood, it hit the shoulder of a wolf rider next to it. Bang! With a muffled sound, the second wolf rider was actually knocked into the body of the third wolf rider. Coincidentally, a Frostfire arrow hit the top of the wolf rider's head. Poof! The heads of the two wolf riders were directly blown to pieces. Almost at the same time, the second arrow arrived. In one breath, it pierced through the eyes of a warg, entered from the left, exited from the right, and then shot into the throat of the second warg. 3 people, 2 wargs, died in an instant. Elven hero. The leader of the wolf riders gritted his teeth. Sylvanas had already turned into a high-speed moving self-propelled cannon, pouring terrifying firepower on the tribe that seemed low-key, but was actually not inferior to Duque's. The iron arrows became the scythe of the Grim Reaper, reaping the lives of the orc wolf riders. 2 arrows in 1 second. 3 arrows in 1 string. The only thing that restricted Sylvanas's firepower was not her own shooting speed, but the lack of arrows. However, if Sylvanas really shot all the quiver of arrows that she had set up in every corner of the camp, the morale of the orcs would probably collapse first. Within the camp, sharp arrows whizzed through the air. Like Duque's magic attacks, they became a death knell for the orcs. Even so, at this moment, the wolf riders also displayed their strength as the core fighting force of the tribe. Heavy casualties. No enemies were seen. The wolf riders still maintained their high morale as they attacked. They were not afraid of death. Even if they were shot to death or blown up, the wargs under them would still bravely charge towards the human camp, searching for traces of the 2 enemies hiding in the dark. Suddenly, there was a change in the human camp. In the air, tall and sturdy elemental creatures were entering the battlefield. Those tall and sturdy creatures that only existed in legends appeared in the air like shadows. There was a large-scale distortion in space. Within the distortion, 3-meter-tall water elemental giants that only had a body and 2 arms, no heads or hands, slowly materialized. The unique spell of ice mages, summon water elemental. The problem was, why the hell did Duque have so many water elemental creatures? When Antonidas summoned water elemental creatures to fight against Gul'dan's demon army, there were only a few dozen of them. But what about Duque? 108 of them. And they were elites. Chapter 335. Was Duque's strength already above Antonidas? Of course not. Antonidas had used his spare magic power to summon the water elementals in order to prevent Gul'dan's minions from interrupting his spellcasting. The core was still the magic itself. The fireballs and ice arrows flying randomly in the air were the real killer moves. Duque did the exact opposite. He thought of himself as a summoner. The magic circuits were operating at full power, and every circuit burst with a bright arcane light. The magic reaction was so strong that the light even penetrated through the muscles and veins of his body, and many of Duque's magic circuit lines could even be seen on the surface of his body. Duque was clearly in a bunker on the defensive line, but there was an illusion that the light was going to penetrate the outside of the bunker. Gavinrad and Alusia, who were guarding near Duque, were shocked. They had never heard of Duque's spellcasting method of squeezing out all of his magic power. Just like how a person could not exert 500 pounds of force just because he had 500 pounds of strength, the power of the magic circuit could rarely be pushed to the limit. The limit that a person felt was not the limit that they could bear in the real sense. To explore that limit, they needed to practice, analyze, perceive, and improve themselves bit by bit. Similarly, there were many mages who accidentally went overboard when exploring their own limits, and their original magic circuits were overloaded and burned. Duque's pushing was the limit, but it felt like he was walking on a high wire. 98%, 99%, 99%. 99%, that kind of exquisite control made Alusia gape and tongue-tied. He could overload and die at any time, but he lingered on the edge of the gate to hell like a horse on a cliff, refusing to take even half a step in. The effect was obvious. One after another, huge circular magic circles unfolded in the air above the top of the bunker. The magic waves were so strong that Alusia could feel them even through the thick stone layer. The magic array slowly rotated in a clockwise direction, and the lines constructed by the arcane light expanded along the magic array, rapidly expanding the area of the magic array. Glug glug. With a strange sound, a huge, translucent, illusory waterfall appeared in the air. It was a huge drain with a width of more than 50 meters. Copious amounts of water poured down from the sky. There should have been a sound like a landslide or a tsunami, but in fact, there was no sound at all. Ah! Wuxia let out a low cry. Did all the water disappear? No, the water had already entered the bodies of some elemental creatures. In the world that mortals could not see with their naked eyes, Wuxia could clearly see the huge waterfall split into 256. He constructed 256 huge water elementals. 10 seconds later, the water elements crossed the boundary between the illusory elemental world and the Azeroth material world, appearing in front of the orcs. Therefore, it looked as if water elements had appeared from the void. The wolf cavalrymen were petrified. For a moment, they didn't even know whether to continue attacking or to retreat from the narrow bridge in a sorry state. In fact, no matter which choice they made, it was a dead end. They could only watch helplessly as death approached them step by step. Through the firing hole in the bunker, Gavin Raid saw the water elementals on a killing spree. The biggest characteristic of elemental creatures was that their core was an element. If the elemental group was not destroyed, there was not much meaning in simply physically destroying its body. If you cut a ball of water with a knife, could you cut the water in two and kill the water? If you smashed the arm of the earth elemental giant with a hammer, it would not be able to withstand the earth elemental's call. The earth would rise from the ground and automatically repair its body. The key to dealing with elemental creatures was to destroy the energy structure of its elemental core. The wolf cavalrymen were in a difficult situation. They had wanted to rush up, find Duque, and kill Duque with a knife. Who would have thought that there would be so many impenetrable water elementals coming out? And they were F*King elites. Knives could not cut them, and the wolf teeth could not bite them to death. Against the impenetrable water elementals, the wolf cavalrymen could only try their best to avoid them. But the water elementals could still shoot frost arrows. The entire northern position of the bridge fell into a one-sided massacre. Let's go. There was a clear weakness in Duque's voice. Wuxia looked at Duque and said to Gavin Raid, I don't have much magic left. I'll support Master. You open the way and cover us. Duque felt that something was wrong. The unexpected feeling of weakness forced him to put half of his body on Wuxia's soft but firm shoulder. Gavin Raid did not waste any time. He pulled out his hammer and strode ahead to open the way. His and Wuxia's worries were a little unnecessary. With the protection of the water elemental army and Servanas, the god of death, it was impossible for any orcs to get close. When they saw a large number of water elementals emerging from the position, Zulahid's dragon cavalrymen also did not dare to get close. After a few turns, it actually did not take much time. Duque and his party had already passed through the tunnel under the hill. They came to the back of the hill. The view in front of them suddenly opened up. 100 fully armed Highland Knights of Riptide Castle were waiting there. After Duque sent away 80% of them without anyone noticing, these promised knight candidates had already come to Duque and swore their loyalty to Duque. Duque also followed the ancient etiquette and used the magic staff he inherited from Mediv, the incomplete Atish, to touch the shoulders of these knights on both sides. The official knighthood ceremony was to touch the left and right shoulders with a long sword. Firstly, Duque was a pharaoh, and the rule of the mage lords was to use a staff instead of a long sword. Secondly, Duque only now realized that he did not even have a suitable staff other than the head of Atish. In order to show respect, he had to tie a sandalwood stick to Atish and use it as a temporary staff. What made Duque's head hurt the most was that even though it was only the head of Atish, it actually provided a magic boost that surpassed all the common goods on the market. No matter what, the swearing ceremony was sacred. King Salas even snuck over to witness the ceremony with his own eyes. He then rushed back through the night. When 100 of them were raised and lowered in unison, when the neat and uniform movements were displayed in front of him, he could not help but feel a thrilling power in his heart, and he had the urge to immediately cheer. "Greetings to our Lord, Grand Duke Marcus." The uniform roar pierced through everyone's eardrums like thunder. That's right. These outstanding knights were now Duque's strength. Duque smiled. "Let's go, we're going to give the orcs a big gift." Big gift? What kind of gift? A gift that could cause more casualties than the thousands of soldiers who volunteered to cover the retreat? Although the knights were extremely determined, everyone was curious and excited about the big gift that Duque mentioned. You're tuning in to the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.